Welcome to Buddhism Seeds, where each story is a seed of awakening. For over 2,000 years, Buddhist monks have devoted their lives to exploring one seemingly small thing, something that can entirely transform how we live. It is the secret of inner peace. Peace doesn't come from trying to control the outer world, but from understanding the world within. Tonight, you will hear stories that are ancient, quiet, and simple, yet they carry timeless truths. These are not dogmas or abstract philosophies. They are slices of real life where ordinary people touched the extraordinary, a moment of realization, when the mind stops resisting and life becomes clear. You don't have to try to understand or remember. Just let the words pass through you like wind across a lake. Your breath will slow, your heartbeat will soften, and somewhere in the quiet, a very natural peace will begin to open. Now gently close your eyes, let go of the burdens of the day, and allow yourself to be guided on a journey where each Zen story is a small doorway into the vast world of stillness and awakening. On a misty mountainside stood a small village known for its reclusive painters. Among drifting clouds brushing the thatched rooftops, each artist spent a lifetime trying to touch the invisible, stillness. But among them, only one was young and restless. His name was Eta. Eta believed that if he could paint a perfectly still lake, he would capture the secret of peace. Each morning while the fog clung to the pines, he would carry his easel to the lake where the water was so clear it reflected the changing sky. He would sit silently, watching each bird in flight, each leaf fall, each ripple spread. But the moment he lowered his brush, a breeze would rise. The surface would stir, the clouds would shift, the light would change. The stillness he had seen vanished. Frustrated, Eta would tear the canvas and start over. Day after day, season after season, unfinished paintings piled up in his small room. One afternoon, as the lake glowed golden at sunset, Eta lost his temper. He hurled his brush into the water. The small splash echoed like mockery. "Why can't I paint a still lake?" he cried. "Why is it always disturbed?" A calm, wind-like voice replied from behind. "Are you trying to paint the lake? Or trying to make it still?" Eta turned around. An old Zen master stood there, dressed in dark robes, holding a bamboo staff. He often walked by the lake in silent meditation. The master looked at the water-streaked painting and gently said, "You cannot paint stillness if your mind is not still." That simple sentence struck Eta like a drop of water rippling 1,000 waves. He looked at the lake and realized it was his own mind that stirred it. His breath was shallow, his heart racing, his thoughts chaotic. Even when the wind had passed, the water trembled, because the storm was inside him. From that day on, Eta stopped painting. He still came to the lake, but without brushes or colors. He simply observed. In the morning, the mist would rise. At noon, sunlight pierced the surface. By evening, clouds drifted in shades of light and shadow. Sometimes he saw his reflection blend with the clouds. Sometimes the lake seemed to be looking back. Slowly, in that stillness, something shifted. He no longer wanted to hold on to stillness, but to dwell within it. The boundary between observer and scene began to fade. Trees, water, clouds, breath, all moved together in one slow rhythm. Then one morning, as first light touched the lake, Eta understood stillness is not something to grasp. It appears when we stop trying to make everything stay still. just as a lake reflects the sky only when it's undisturbed, the human mind sees truth only when it's no longer clouded by grasping. Eta smiled. He set up his easel again and held the brush, but this time not to capture anything. He made a single stroke, light as breath flowing naturally across the page. That final painting wasn't perfect. The lines trembled, the colors bled gently, there were no sharp edges or detailed forms. Yet everyone who saw it felt something unusual. Life. A feeling of ease spread through them, as if the lake in the painting was reflecting them, not the other way around. From then on, Eta no longer sought stillness. He simply lived with it. In each breath, each ripple, each gust of wind through the pines. And when asked his secret to painting peace, he would just smile. Let the lake be itself, and let the human heart stop trying to change it. Eta's story spread throughout the village, not as a legend of a great artist, but as a tale of someone who learned to stop seeking. Because sometimes the deepest stillness is when we stop demanding the world to be still. Eta's story is a mirror to the human heart. We all have moments like his, trying to control everything to reach stillness, yet the more we force it, the more restless we feel. Many think peace means no noise, no disruption, no change. But Zen teaches true stillness is not in the scene, but in how we see the scene. When the mind is caught in the desire to control everything, becomes unstable. The wind on the lake is not the enemy. The craving to grasp is what stirs the water. Just like in life, every time we try to force others to think like us, or the world to stand still, we are creating waves in our own inner lake. The Buddha once said, "The mind is the root of all things. When the mind is at peace, all is at peace." If we look deeply, we'll see the world doesn't need arranging to be beautiful. It already is. What causes suffering isn't change. It's our refusal to accept it. The image of Ita seeing his trembling reflection in the water is a gentle metaphor for the human mind. We often feel the world is unstable, but truly, it's reflecting our inner turmoil. Each night as you lie down, your mind becomes like a lake. Memories, worries, tomorrow's plans all stir the surface. The more you try to think less, the more it ripples. Some force themselves to sleep to be still, but the effort itself keeps them awake. Like Ida, only when you release the urge to control can your body and mind return to their natural state. Let sleep come like clouds passing over the lake, uninvited, unchased. Modern science agrees mindfulness and relaxation before bed calm the brain's prefrontal cortex, the part tied to anxiety and overthinking. When you simply follow your breath, your heartbeat steadies and the body enters its natural rest. Like a lake, once the wind stops, the water clears on its own. Try this tonight. Before closing your eyes quietly, ask, is there wind in my mind right now? If there is, just smile and watch it pass. Don't push it away. Don't hold on to it. Peace isn't something to create. It's something to recognize. Ada's story holds many layers. On the surface, it's about a painter searching for stillness. More deeply, it's about each of us learning to see the self that wants to control. As the Buddha taught, all suffering arises from greed, anger, and delusion. And greed isn't just for possessions. It's the hidden hunger to awaken, to be calm, to be acknowledged. That hunger pulls us away from now. True practice isn't about stopping the wind, but seeing the wind and still seeing the water. When you observe your emotions without judgment, you are living mindfully. When your mind reflects the world without being clouded by reaction, you are living wisely. Let each moment, joy, sadness, the tiniest experience, become a mirror to your mind. Like Ida, when you realize the lake doesn't have to be still to be beautiful, you'll know life doesn't need to be perfect to be worth living. And then, in every moment, peace won't be something to seek. It will be something you live. When Aita understood that stillness wasn't out there, but within, we are reminded every spiritual journey begins with listening inside. When the early morning breeze passed through the pine forest, the sound of the temple bell from the distant mountainside echoed steadily, like the breathing of the earth itself. Every morning, that sound awakened people from their daily worries. Sometimes, just one bell could make us realize how fragile life truly is, and that peace is not something permanent. It comes and goes, like clouds drifting over a mountain peak. Have you ever wondered why we fear losing what we love, even though we know everything is impermanent? We know that everyone will one day part ways, that all things decay, and yet we tremble in the face of change, as if some part of us is always clinging to what cannot be held. In an old temple nestled in the mountains wrapped in white clouds, there once lived a girl named Nami who carried this fear deeply. She was not afraid of darkness, not afraid of loneliness, but of one thing, only the temple collapsing. For her, the temple was not just a roof over her head, but the place where every piece of peace she had ever known took root. Nami had come to the temple as a child. Orphaned, she was raised and taught by the abbot. Every brick, every wooden pillar of the old temple carried her small fingerprints, whether it was a smudge of paint or muddy footprints after a rainy day. To Nami, the temple wasn't just a place to live, it was her entire world, where she grew up, learned to read, chanted sutras, and felt what it meant to be loved. The temple stood halfway up the mountain, small and weathered, but warm like a teacher's palm. When heavy rains came, drops would fall rhythmically from the old tiled roof, striking the water jars and echoing like silent chants of time. Nami often sat under the eaves watching raindrops fall into puddles, ripple outward, then disappear. In those moments, she felt a strange calm, as if the world had never known suffering. But that year, the mountain began to stir. At first, it was just the faintest tremors, enough to make a teacup quiver. Then small cracks appeared in the walls. Roof tiles loosened. Villagers whispered that an earthquake was coming. From that day on, Nami's sleep became fragile. Each night, she stayed up watching over the temple. Every time the earth shook even slightly, she would rush out to check the roof, the pillars, the bell. She was terrified that one day, the only home she had would collapse in ruins. The abbot noticed her worry and gently asked, "Why do you worry so much, Nami?" With trembling voice and tears in her eyes, she replied, "I'm afraid the temple will fall. I'm afraid you and everyone will get hurt. I'm afraid of losing the only refuge I have." He was quiet for a moment, then pointed toward the pine forest, where the wind was swaying the trees. "You see Nami trees that are too rigid break in storms. Only those that bend can survive the wind." Nami looked in the direction of his hand, but inside her the fear remained. She couldn't understand how someone could be so calm in the face of danger. Then that night, what she feared most arrived. The ground shook violently. The mountain roared like a giant beast. Buddha statues toppled, roof tiles shattered. The temple bell rang not from the wind, but from the temple itself, trembling. Nami ran from her room, slipping on the cracking ground. She clung to a wooden pillar, crying and praying. "Please don't fall. Please don't fall. I beg you, don't fall." But the temple kept breaking apart. A large wall collapsed, filling the air with dust. Coughing and disoriented, she felt her body pulled down by the debris. When everything stopped, Nami opened her eyes in the rubble. No more bell, no more rain, just the sound of her own breath and the smell of smoke and dust. Next to her was the abbot, still sitting, his back against a rock, his face calm and peaceful. He showed no fear. Seeing Nami cry, he took her hand, thin but warm, and said, "You see, the temple has fallen, but we are still here." Those words made her cry harder. She looked around. Where the altar used to be were now broken pieces of wood. Where she used to sweep leaves every morning was now a pile of bricks. Everything most familiar had become ruins. Emptiness spread through her like the end of the world. And yet in that moment of panic, she noticed something strange. Her heart was still beating. Her breath was still steady. And the ground after everything was becoming still again. A small sound rang out, the remaining temple bell, now hanging crooked among the rubble, gently swaying in the wind. That sound made Nami pause. In that moment, she understood something she had never realized before. Life continues, even when the form it takes has changed. The abbot looked at her and said in a voice soft as breath, "You once believed peace was inside the temple, didn't you? But true peace lies in this breath, in how you accept and move through change. The temple may fall, but if your heart is calm, you still have a place to rest." Nami stayed silent. His words were not just comfort, they opened something deeper. As if a wall inside her had also collapsed, letting light in. The next morning, when the sun rose and the dust settled, Nami stepped over the broken bricks. In the cracked silence, she saw what she had never seen before. Dew resting on a fractured Buddha statue, golden light streaming through a gap in the wall. Everything, though broken, was still alive, still breathing. From that day on, Nami no longer feared the earth's tremors. Whenever the wind was strong, she simply closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and smiled. She understood now peace doesn't come from keeping everything still. It comes from trusting that even if everything collapses, you can still stand. And in the sound of the newly forged temple bell, echoing each sunset, Nami always hears that truth, the gentle reminder from the old abbot. The temple may fall, but a peaceful heart never crumbles. Nami's story is not just about a temple. It is a metaphor for our own hearts. Each of us has a temple inside. Perhaps it's our job, a loved one, our reputation, or a belief we hold tightly. We believe that as long as we keep those things intact, we will be safe. But then something happens. A person leaves, money is lost. Health declines, the future shifts, and the temple inside us crumbles. In those moments, most people react like Nami, panic, resistance, holding on. But the Buddha taught that worry does not stop hardship. It only takes us away from what's still here. When Nami sat among the ruins and could still hear the bell, she entered a moment of natural mindfulness. A moment when the mind does not run, does not judge, but simply realizes, I am still breathing. In meditation, this is called egolessness in impermanence, when we stop anchoring ourselves in anything, even the form of safety itself. Modern psychology says something similar in crisis. Those who can recenter in the present moment recover more easily. They don't get stuck in what should have been, but return to what is. Nami's earthquake could be any upheaval in your life, losing a job, a breakup illness, or just a sleepless night worrying about the future. But remember, it's not the tremor that causes our suffering, it's our resistance to it. At night, lying in bed, your mind might tremble too from thoughts, regrets, fears. Just pause. Close your eyes. Breathe in deeply. Breathe out slowly. Don't try to push thoughts away. Don't fight the fear. Just look at it the way Nami looked at the fallen temple. When you see without interfering, your breath becomes the thread connecting you back to peace. Imagine each breath as a bell still ringing among the ruins, every inhale a gentle reminder, I am still here. Every exhale a release of what you cannot keep. If you practice this each night, even for a few minutes, your body will learn to rest just as the ground quiets after a quake. Neuroscience shows that slow breathing calms the amygdala, the brain's fear center. Just 3 deep breaths can help bring your nervous system back to balance. As the abbot told Nami, the temple may fall, but we still have our breath. That breath is the foundation of meditation, the shelter for every storm within. This story reminds us of one of the Buddha's most essential teachings, impermanence. Everything that is born must change, nothing lasts forever. But instead of fearing that truth, we can learn to see it as part of the living flow. A wise person doesn't try to build an eternal temple in a world of change. They build it in their heart, where no earthquake can destroy it. Mindfulness is the act of laying each brick of that temple. Every time we return to the breath, we rebuild our inner sanctuary. Every time we let go of worry, we replace a pillar with trust and wisdom. And one day you'll realize peace doesn't come after the world settles. It arises in the middle of the shaking. Just like Nami when the temple outside collapsed, the temple within finally stood tall. After the earthquake that brought down Nami's temple, the mountain night became eerily still. Only the sound of wind rustling through the leaves and the faint chirping of crickets remained, like the last lingering chants in the darkness. In such stillness, people often fear the dark, not because it hides the path, but because it reveals that we never truly had a light of our own. So many times in life we cling to light, the light of belief, of fame, of those we love, or the safety we once knew. And when the winds of life blow hard, we tremble, afraid that flame will be extinguished. But what we rarely realize is that true light was never in the lantern we held, but in a deeper place we had forgotten inside ourselves. Kenta's story begins on a night like this, a night of howling winds, trembling lanterns, and the testing of the human heart. Kenta was a young novice living in a small mountainside temple where morning fog blanketed the ground like the sky's thin quilt. Each morning, the bell echoed, far dissolving into the clouds, into the wind, into the breath of the mountain. But within Kenta, there was still a darkness the bell could not reach, a fear of the night. Since he was very small, he had feared the moment the last light of day disappeared. Every night, Kenta lit a small paper lantern beside his bed. Its soft yellow glow flickered on the wall, lighting the face of the curled-up boy monk, as if the world's peace would vanish the moment that light went out. That night, rain arrived without warning. A storm rushed from the distant forest like a wounded beast roaring fiercely. Winds bent the pines, rain pounded the roof. Lightning split the sky, flashing over the aging temple. From his room, Kenta heard the lantern outside slamming against the wooden post. "Don't go out. Don't go out," he murmured as he ran to the porch amidst the howling wind. The paper lantern hanging by the door swung wildly, its light blinking as fragile as breath. Kenta spread his arms to shield it, trying to protect the small flame from the rain and wind. The abbot, an elderly Zen master with silver hair, stood quietly inside the doorway watching him. His gaze was deep and still like a lake. He said nothing. The wind howled, water splashed onto Kenta's face. The flame flickered. Kenta held tightly, trembling. Suddenly a gust blew through and ripped the lantern away. The light went out. He stood frozen in the darkness. Only the sound of rain on the roof, wind through the beams, and his own pounding heart remained. Kenta sank to the steps, his hands still clutching empty space, as if trying to hold on to what was lost. Darkness wrapped around him, and he couldn't tell if the wetness on his face was rain or tears. The Zen master stayed silent, watching from the shadows. At dawn, the rain cleared and the courtyard was filled with fallen leaves and puddles, reflecting the clear sky. The Zen master stepped out and found Kenta, still sitting there, exhausted, wet hair drooping over his forehead, eyes shadowed from a sleepless night. He walked over and gently asked, "Did you manage to keep the light?" Kenta bowed his head and answered softly like wind, "I tried my best, but the wind was too strong." The master smiled a smile like sunlight breaking through post-storm clouds. He looked toward the rising sun and spoke slowly. "The wind can blow out lanterns, but it cannot blow out the sun. You were looking for light in the wrong place, Kenta." Kenta looked up. The sunlight poured down, glistening through leftover raindrops on the roof, scattering into countless sparkling fragments. He saw rays dancing on puddles, warmth spreading through the air, and in that moment, his heart lightened. He understood then, true light had never gone out. He had only been staring too hard at the little lantern and forgot that dawn always returns. That afternoon, Kenta cleaned the courtyard. In his hand was the torn, soaked paper lantern. He placed it gently on the temple step, where the sunlight reached, and whispered, "I won't be afraid anymore." That evening, when the master passed by Kenta's room, he saw the boy fast asleep without a lamp. The room was wrapped in darkness, but Kenta's face was calm, peaceful. Moonlight slipped through the window, tracing a soft line across his cheek, like the smile of serenity coming home. In that silence, darkness was no longer frightening. It was simply part of light, just as night is part of day, as exhale is part of inhale. People fear the dark, not because it hides the path, but because it reminds us we never truly had the light we thought we needed. From that night on, Kenta no longer tried to push away the dark. When evening came, he meditated by the window, listening to the wind in the trees, the hum of insects, the rhythm of his own breath merging with the rhythm of the earth. And in that stillness, he discovered true light does not come from a candle or lamp, but from within a place no wind can reach. Kenta's story is a mirror for the human mind. We have all been like him, trying to protect a tiny light in the dark, believing that without it, we would lose our way. That light might be a relationship we're afraid to lose, a job we think we can't live without, or a belief that we must be strong, be right, be loved. But the Buddha taught, when we fear losing something too much, we mistake outer light for inner light. Kenta's paper lantern represents all that is temporary. The one holding it is awareness itself, the Buddha nature within. When we remember that we are the source of light, even if the lamp goes out, the light remains. In Zen, this is called seeing your true nature, recognizing that the mind is inherently luminous, untouched by outer circumstances. Many believe that peace comes from arranging the outer world, the house, the job, the partner, even sleep. But meditation teaches the opposite. Peace is not the result of arranging, but of releasing. When we stop trying to control the light, we begin to see it. Modern psychology also affirms this. When someone fears losing control, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, activates, releasing stress hormones like cortisol. The more they try to stay calm, the more tension builds. But when we accept that the light might go out, the body shifts into recovery, just like the sun reappears after the storm. True light is not something we hold in our hands. It appears when our mind no longer fears losing it. In modern life, you may be holding onto your own paper lantern. It could be the phone you check each night, afraid to miss something. It could be the endless thoughts before sleep. Will tomorrow be okay? Does that person still care about me? You may think that if you stop thinking, worrying, or checking, you'll be unsafe. But it is the effort to hold on to that light that exhausts your mind. Try letting go like Kenta did. When night falls, instead of clinging to thoughts, turn off the light and sit quietly for a few minutes. Close your eyes and feel your breath. Each inhale is light entering the body. Each exhale is wind releasing anxiety. You don't need to light anything. Let the breath illuminate from within. Then you'll see darkness is not the enemy. It is the backdrop against which true light appears. When the mind is lit, sleep comes gently like calm water. Scientific studies show that just 10 minutes of mindful breathing before bed increases alpha brain waves, helping the mind relax and enter deep rest. The light Kenta sought is also available to you the moment you stop searching. From this story, we learn the Buddhist teaching of innate luminosity, the radiant wisdom present in every being. The Buddha once said, "In every sentient being is the Buddha nature, like empty space, unaffected by clouds, unchanged by light or shadow." This means that even when we are confused in pain or afraid, our true luminous nature is never lost. We only need to remember it. So when you feel darkness surrounding you, whether it's an unresolved issue, a heavy emotion, or a moment of loneliness, pause and ask yourself, where am I looking for the light? If the answer is outside, you know you're lost. If the answer is inside in the breath, in this awareness, you have already returned. Peace doesn't arrive when the storm ends. It comes when you realize you never needed a lamp to see the path. After the story of Kenta and the paper lantern, we saw that true light doesn't reside in objects, but in the mind of the one holding them. Yet when that light shines into the impermanence of the world, it too must learn to be flexible, like water, merging with water, like wind passing through wind. Once I stood by the sea just before a storm. The ocean changed, constantly calm one moment, rolling with waves the next. Some call it chaos, but to one who understands the way, it is simply the breath of nature. We often want to know what will happen, to calculate every possibility and measure every risk. But have you ever realized that life is not a problem to be solved? It's a river that never stops flowing. The story of Isamu, a fisherman on the eastern shore, begins with that very longing, the desire to understand, to control, and ultimately to hear what only a still heart can hear. Isamu was born in a small fishing village where mornings began with oars slicing the sea and the scent of salt in the breeze. Since childhood, he was captivated by the ocean, not only its beauty, but the mystery hidden in every wave. While other children chased kites or collected shells, Isamu sat on a rock, eyes fixed on the horizon, carefully noting wind direction, wave height, and tide levels. The sea has its laws, he often told his father. If I understand them, I will never fear storms. As he grew up, Isamu became an unusually meticulous fisherman. He never went out impulsively. Every trip was calculated to the hour, the tide, the current. He always carried a thick notebook filled with numbers, symbols, and charts. Wind speed, air, temperature, lunar position, tidal patterns. Each line in that notebook was a promise that he could master the sea, the force that had claimed more lives than any enemy. The more he measured, the more confident he became. He could predict almost precisely when the fish would rise or when the current would shift. The village called him the one who reads the sea, and he believed it too. Until the storm came. That day, darkness fell earlier than usual. Black clouds rolled in from the horizon like a curtain swallowing the sun. Isamu stood on his boat, watching the wind wane atop the mast. All his readings were right wind direction, tide, time, water levels. No signs of a storm, but within minutes, the sea changed its voice. Towering waves slammed the boat, water lashed the hull. The wind howled like 1,000 spirits. Nets were ripped away, anchors snapped, the hull filled with water. Villagers shouted and rushed to shore. Only Isamu stood still, staring into the roaring sea. "Impossible," he whispered, voice lost in the wind. Everything was correct. How could this happen? When the storm passed, the village was wrecked. Boats destroyed rooftops. Torn nets scattered along the shore. The sea once again was calm and indifferent. Isamu sat silently for hours at the dock, watching gentle waves lap the shore, bringing back scraps of torn netting. His failure wasn't just loss, it was the collapse of belief. Days later, he visited his old teacher, a retired fisherman who had long abandoned the sea and now lived in seclusion on a hillside. Once the finest captain, the old man had left it all behind to pursue inner practice. Isamu knelt and recounted the storm. His voice was hoarse and weary. "I studied every number, every rule, but the sea still wouldn't obey." The old fisherman smiled. His eyes held wrinkles like ancient waves. "The sea never obeys anyone, Isamu. You measured it with your mind, but you never listened to it." Isamu frowned. "Listen to the sea? How can I listen to something that doesn't speak?" The master closed his eyes, voice low. "When you're truly still, you'll hear the sea breathing. Every wave tells a story. Every gust is a whisper. When your heart stops trying to understand, it will begin to see." Those words stayed with Isamu. That night, for the first time, he sat by the sea without his notebook. No recording, no calculations, just sitting. The sea was the same, but something had changed. He began to notice sounds he'd never heard before. Waves breathing rhythmically, sand gliding beneath the surface wind, slipping through torn nets like sighs. He said nothing, and slowly, that silence opened a new kind of knowing one no number could offer. Day by day, Isamu still went fishing, but left the notebook behind. He no longer tried to predict the sea. He let it lead. On stormy days, he cast his nets early. On calm ones, he simply watched the sun rise over the water. Gradually, he understood the sea doesn't need to be conquered, only listened to. One early morning, when mist still veiled the surface, Isamu sat on the boat, hand drifting in the water. Gentle waves caressed his fingers. He looked out where sea met sky and smiled. Nothing left to measure, nothing to control. Only stillness, like the sea reflecting the sky and the sky reflecting back. For the first time, Isamu truly heard the ocean, and in that breath, he heard himself. Isamu's story is a metaphor for the mind we believe that the more we know, the more control we gain over life. But knowledge is not wisdom. Knowledge comes from outside books, data, past experience. True wisdom arises from inner presence when we become quiet enough to hear reality itself. In Buddhism, this is called direct insight, seeing things as they are without the filters of judgment, fear, or craving. Isamu failed not because his calculations were wrong, but because he was no longer present. He saw the sea through numbers, not as the sea. Just as we see our loved ones through the lens of who we expect them to be, or ourselves through what we think we should be, every sensation becomes a measurement, and life loses its life. Zen teaches to understand water. Don't measure it from the shore. Step into it and feel it flow past your legs. Modern neuroscience supports this. When we rely too heavily on rational analysis, the brain's prefrontal cortex overworks, suppressing the limbic system, the center of emotion and intuition. We know more, but feel less. When you can no longer hear the sea, you can no longer hear yourself. You may see Isamu in your own life. You measure your heart rate with a watch count, your steps on an app, check email even before bed. You think that if you have enough data, you'll feel at peace. But peace doesn't come from knowing more. It comes from knowing when to stop. Before bed, instead of replaying tomorrow's plans, sit quietly in the dark for a few minutes. Listen to your breath. Inhale like waves rising. Exhale like waves receding. Try letting go. No breath counting. No heart monitoring. Just listen. The way Isamu learned to listen to the sea. When you truly listen, body and mind will realign because the body knows how to heal itself. According to the International Sleep Institute, those who practice meditative awareness before bed experience elevated theta waves, the brain state of relaxed alertness. They sleep deeper and report reduced anxiety and greater emotional balance. Like the sea, your mind will never calm if you try to force it. But when you listen to it, like listening to waves, it naturally returns to stillness. The Buddha said, "When the mind is as clear as still water, all things reflect as they are." This means that wisdom doesn't come from effortful thinking, but from deep listening. A student of the way must remember there are two kinds of knowing with the head and knowing with the heart. Knowing with the head divides labels and judges. Knowing with the heart unites, empathizes, and understands. In the moment you pause to listen deeply, you are already practicing Zen, not by sitting cross-legged or chanting, but by truly hearing the sounds of life, the voice of another, the breeze, the breath, and even the silence that holds it all. From this, we learn the teaching of egolessness. It's not that we understand life, but that life moves through us. Let go of the need to know, to measure, to predict. That is the path to wisdom. When you lie down to rest tonight, don't try to make the mind quiet. Simply listen to life as it is. The breath, the heartbeat, the night breeze, and the silence between two breaths, all are sacred scriptures of the present moment. After Isamu learned to listen to the sea instead of measuring it, he understood that some things in life cannot be forced. They can only be received at the right time. In the same way, in spiritual practice or in our daily lives, we often want everything to bloom according to our wishes, faster, easier, more perfectly. But life, like the seasons of rain and sun, has its own rhythm that the human heart cannot predict. Have you ever asked yourself, why haven't the results come, even though I've tried so hard and planted so many seeds of goodness? That question has caused deep frustration for many. We believe that if we work hard, the rewards will come on schedule. But some seeds don't sprout in the sun. They bloom in the rain. Some beautiful things only appear after we think we've lost everything. The story of Mako, a young boy from a small village at the foot of the mountain, is a gentle illustration of that truth. The lesson about the timing of life, which follows the rhythm of the universe, not the calendar of man. Mako was about 12, living with his mother in a small house with a backyard garden. Their home sat on the edge of the village where mornings were filled with mist and birds calling from afar. Mako loved that garden more than anything. He spent hours talking to the leaves, dusting each green blade and naming each plant as if they were his closest friends. Every morning, his mother would find him crouched in the dewy soil, whispering softly, perhaps telling the plants about school or thanking them for blooming a new flower. In the golden light of dawn, their little garden felt like a private world, peaceful, gentle, and full of life. One day, on his way to school, Mako noticed something glimmering near his foot. He bent down and picked it up, a strange seed, small as a fingernail, shiny black and hard like stone. A friend glanced over and laughed. "That one's dead. It won't grow even if you plant it." But Mako couldn't throw it away. He held the seed tightly in his palm, feeling its cold but real presence. That afternoon, he dug a small hole in the sunniest part of the garden, placed the seed and covered it with soil and poured a little water. Each morning after that, Mako checked the spot. He watered it, cleared weeds, and waited. One day passed, then 2, then 10. The earth remained still, no sign, no green sprout. He began to feel sad. One day, Mako visited the small village temple where an old monk often sat reading sutras beneath a Bodhi tree. With palms pressed together, Mako politely asked, "Master, I planted a seed and water it every day, but it still hasn't grown. Did I do something wrong?" The monk smiled, his eyes as gentle as an autumn lake. "You watered it with care, but the seed needs time. Some seeds sprout when the soil warms, others only wake when they hear the rain. Plants don't grow on the planter's schedule but on their own rhythm. Mako nodded, though he didn't fully understand. He kept watering the seed daily so regularly that sometimes the soil flooded. He believed that if he just tried harder, the seed would feel his love and decide to grow. Then one evening, dark clouds gathered. Winds rose and a heavy storm swept in. Rain pounded the roof, the garden, the windows. Soil-eroded mud washed over everything. Mako watched from the window, heart heavy as he saw the planting spot drown in dirty water. The next morning, when the sky cleared, Mako rushed outside. Everything was soaked. The patch where he planted the seed was just a muddy puddle. The seed was gone. He knelt down, digging through the earth in despair, his tears mixed with mud. "It's gone," he whispered. "The seed is truly dead." Days passed. Mako no longer visited the garden as often. He went to school, helped his mother, but a quiet sadness lingered. He began to understand loss, not because the seed was valuable, but because it carried a child's innocent belief that all effort should be rewarded. Then one morning, as the first spring sunlight spilled through the window, Mako decided to tidy the garden. The soil had dried. Leaves had fallen. As he pulled weeds and cleared stones, he reached the old spot and noticed a tiny green dot pushing up from the dry mud. He held his breath. It was a sprout, fragile, slender, but determined. Mako froze tears welling up, not from sadness but surprise. He realized what he thought was lost had been quietly alive, waiting for the right moment to emerge. That afternoon, he returned to the temple, joy shining in his eyes. The old monk sat beneath the Bodhi tree, watching sunlight spread across the brick courtyard. "Master, the seed I planted has sprouted." "Ah, then it has heard the rain." The monk smiled. "But why didn't it grow when I watered it every day only after the heavy storm?" The monk looked at him and replied softly, "Because you watered it with expectation. The rain watered it with nature." Mako lowered his head, heart filled with something unexplainable. He realized he had been living the same way he watered the seed, always hoping for results, always needing something to happen. But seeds, like life, only sprout when the sower learns to let go. From that day on, Mako continued to water the garden each morning, but no longer waited for results. He did it quietly, as a ritual of love, and each time he saw the sprout grow, he remembered the monk's words. "Some things only bloom when we stop waiting for them to bloom." This seemingly simple story holds a profound truth from Zen practice. Life never unfolds on our schedule. It has its own timing, its own way of sprouting, and sometimes it needs a flooding rain to break open the seed's shell. In Buddhism, this relates to the teaching of impermanence and dependent origination. All things require sufficient causes and conditions to bear fruit. When the causes are present but conditions not yet ripe, we cannot force the flower to bloom. Mako watered the seed every day, just like we tirelessly pursue goals, love work, peace, even enlightenment. But the more we cling to outcomes, the more our anxious urgency floods the soil. Zen teaches, a flower only blooms when the observer stops waiting for it. Just like sleep, we cannot sleep by trying to sleep. We only fall asleep when we stop trying, when body and mind surrender to the present. Modern psychology calls this the paradox of control. The harder we try to achieve a desired state, the more it eludes us. When we let go of control, the nervous system relaxes, the body regains balance, and what needs to happen unfolds naturally. Like the seed sprouting from mud, what we thought was lost may become the soil where true life begins. In daily life, you may find yourself in Mako's shoes in many forms. Perhaps you're nurturing a dream, a relationship, or a hope you've poured everything into, yet the result remains silent. When it hasn't come, yet don't assume the seed is dead. It may just be resting beneath the surface, preparing to emerge stronger. Before bed, instead of worrying about tomorrow, about what still hasn't come, try sitting in stillness for a few minutes. Place your hand over your heart and quietly say, "Everything is unfolding in its right time." Inhale deeply. Exhale slowly. Let each breath be like gentle rain soaking the soil. No need to rush. No need to force. Imagine your mind as Mako's garden. Each thought is a seed. Some sprout instantly. Others need a rainy season. And it's patience, not interference, that nourishes your inner life the most. Scientific studies show that when people practice acceptance-based mindfulness meditation, their heart rate slows, sleep deepens, and emotional resilience improves significantly. That's when the mind stops resisting time and aligns with the universe's natural pace. Buddhist teaching says, all things arise from causes and conditions. Nothing appears earlier or later than its necessary moment. Seeds need rain to crack open. People need hardship to open their hearts. From this story, we learn the lesson of trust and surrender. Trust isn't waiting for what we want. It's believing that everything that happens carries its own meaning. When something is lost, remember, perhaps in that very moment, the soil has never been more ready for a new seed to sprout. When life feels dark, maybe the rain is watering your unseen garden. Let your heart learn to trust the timing of the universe, not the timeline of the ego. That is the spirit of mindfulness in impermanence, knowing that every movement, whether gentle or fierce, is part of the path to awakening. After Mako realized that the seed sprouted in its own time, not according to human will, we understand something further. Every deep transformation arrives when we stop struggling against the natural flow. Yet there are times when life not only makes us wait, but also forces us to let go of what we once thought was ourselves. Each person has something to be proud of, talent, reputation, role, or something that makes them feel valuable. But when that disappears, when work collapses, when loved ones leave, when health fades, the real question arises, who am I when there is nothing left to prove? The story of Tadashi, a once famous archer, is a profound answer to that question. A man who lost the very thing that gave him confidence, but in losing it, found himself. Tadashi was a master archer. His bow hung in an ancient temple deep in the forest, where each autumn the courtyard was blanketed with fallen maple leaves. People called him Eye of Heaven. For decades, not a single arrow missed its mark. Whether the target stood far off in mist or in the dark of night, the string would sound once, and the arrow would land dead center. They said Tadashi didn't shoot with his eyes alone, but with his breath and soul. He taught his students, when the arrow leaves your hand, your mind must be still as a lake, and your eyes bright as the moon on water. Under his guidance, generations of archers matured. Tadashi's name spread throughout the region, becoming a living legend, a symbol of absolute focus and calm. But destiny arrived quietly. His eyesight began to fade. At first, only small, blurred patches, then the world in front of him grew hazy like a fog. He tried to ignore it, kept practicing, kept teaching. But each time he drew the bow, the arrow drifted a little off. One day, during practice, Tadashi completely missed. His students stood frozen faces full of confusion. He tried again, still wrong. A third time the arrow struck the ground 10 steps from the target. A cold wind passed. No one spoke, but he understood the eye of heaven had lost its sight. The degeneration progressed quickly. Within months, Tadashi saw nothing but shimmering darkness. The man who taught others to see beyond vision now had nothing to see. Students drifted away. The name Master Tadashi now carried pity. The temple remained, the bow still hung, but his name faded into the wind. One night, Tadashi sat alone in the temple courtyard listening to fallen leaves rustle. Moonlight shone on the roof, but he could no longer see. A heavy emptiness rose in his heart. Without sight, who am I? He asked himself. If I can't shoot, what reason do I have to exist? Soft footsteps came from behind. It was the abbot, an old friend with whom Tadashi often discussed the way. The monk sat beside him in silence, then asked, "What are you looking at, Tadashi?" "I'm looking at the darkness." "And can you see it?" "No, master." "Then try listening to it." Tadashi froze. Listen. To darkness. He had never thought of that. The next morning he went to the courtyard with his old bow. He did not look, did not aim, did not measure distance. He inhaled deeply, exhaled slowly. In that breath, he heard the string tighten gently. The wind slipped through pine branches, his heartbeat blending with the sounds of earth and sky. He shot. The arrow landed in the dirt, just a few steps from the target. For the first time in months, Tadashi smiled. Not because he hit or missed, but because he had heard the sound of the arrow, something he had never heard when he could see. Day after day, he continued training. No longer trying to see, he learned to hear with his whole body, feeling every change in the wind, every vibration in the air. He heard the silence between breaths, the space between the night insects' chirps. The more he listened, the quieter his mind became. One autumn morning, mist still covering the ground, a few former students returned. They saw Tadashi standing in the courtyard, eyes closed, bow in hand. He drew the string, breathing steadily, his whole being still as a statue. The string snapped thwack, the arrow flew through space and struck the center of the target. No one could believe their eyes. One student began to cry. "Master, how did you hit it? You can't see anymore." Tadashi smiled softly, face calm like morning mist on the temple roof. "Because I no longer need to see. When I stopped proving that I could shoot, I finally shot from my true self." A breeze passed, maple leaves falling, touching the bow. In that stillness, Tadashi stood in the misty courtyard, eyes without sight, but his heart brighter than ever. And perhaps in that moment, he saw something the physical eyes never could, the light of letting go. Tadashi's story is a symbol of the journey of releasing the self, what we cling to in order to define who we are. When he still had sight, the arrow expressed his ego, shooting to prove, to be admired, to maintain the legend of the eye of heaven. But losing that ability forced him to face the emptiness inside, where all roles, names, and talents dissolve. That is the moment people fear most, when nothing is left to define them. they feel like nothing. But in Zen, nothingness is not loss, it is the beginning. When Tadashi no longer saw with his eyes, he began to see with his mind. When he no longer sought the target, he became one with the bow, the arrow, the breath. This is the spirit of non-self when there is no longer a me, separate from the action, only pure presence. The Buddha taught, there is no doer, no deed, no one to receive. When these three dissolve, action becomes as natural as wind blowing, as rain falling. In modern psychology, this state is called the flow state. When people completely release the need to prove themselves, they reach their natural highest performance. Research shows that in this state, the brain reduces activity in the self-referential network, expanding awareness and creativity. Tadashi no longer needed eyesight because his mind had become the eye. In life, we are often like Tadashi before he lost his sight. We act with an imaginary audience in our heads, people who will judge, praise, or compare. We do things to prove our worth, to be recognized, to feel good enough. But the more we try to prove, the farther we drift from ourselves. Each time you ask, "Am I doing well enough?" is the moment you're shooting an arrow off target. Letting go does not mean abandoning effort. It means doing wholeheartedly without clinging to the result. When you wash dishes, just wash. When you work, just work. When you love, just love. No one to prove, to nothing to achieve. And strangely, when you live this way, everything flows more easily. Like Tadashi, when he no longer had eyes to see, he shot more accurately than ever. At night, before sleep, place your hand on your chest, close your eyes, and ask, "What am I doing today, just to prove my worth?" If something arises, inhale deeply and exhale slowly. Feel the breath pass through your heart, through your chest, like an arrow leaving the bowstring. No need to hit the target. Just be real. Many studies show that when people release the constant self-evaluation mode, the brain secretes serotonin and oxytocin, the hormones of relaxation and connection. In those moments, sleep comes gently like breath because the mind is no longer straining to be someone else. Tadashi shows us this only when there's nothing left to prove do we truly live ourselves. The Buddha taught that all suffering begins with attachment to the self, believing, "I must be this, I must succeed, I must be recognized." When that image of I collapses, we think we've lost everything, but in truth, that's when the real begins to appear. Just as the archer no longer sees with his eyes, the practitioner no longer needs to see himself practicing. The mind becomes still, action arises naturally, and results come on their own. Within each of us is a Tadashi, the part trying to prove worth and the part waiting to be freed. You don't need to be someone better. You only need to be real with your breath, with this moment. When you live this way, every arrow of life finds its true mark. Because there is no one shooting, only life shooting itself. After Tadashi learned to shoot with his breath instead of his eyes, we realize that when people stop trying to prove their worth, life naturally becomes precise and free. But then another question arises. If we no longer need to prove ourselves, then what are we truly living for? In life, many people, young and old alike, carry a quiet emptiness inside. They say, "I do everything right, but something still feels missing." That absence isn't material. it's the lack of connection with oneself. We hear countless sounds every day, people, machines, the noise of life, but we rarely hear our own mind. The story of Leon, a young monk in an ancient temple, symbolizes that moment, the moment someone discovers that meditation isn't about sitting still, but about listening to the breath of consciousness itself. In a small temple nestled in a valley, every morning begins with the sound of the bell. Its resonance drifts through the thin mist across moss-covered tiles along rows of pine trees and gradually fades into the silence. For those in the temple, it marks the start of a mindful day, gentle calm, like the first breath of dawn. The one assigned to strike the bell was Leon, a young and eager meditation student. He loved the bell as much as he loved his own breath. Each morning, while the valley was still asleep, Leon stepped into the courtyard with his wooden mallet standing tall, taking a deep breath. Then, boom, a clear sound echoed, full and far-reaching. The sound traveled over mountains, bounced off cliff faces, creating layers of resonance like a dialogue between earth and sky. Inside the temple, monks rose from bed, washed, chanted, and sat for meditation. Everyone knew when the first bell rang, a new day of mindfulness had begun. Leon took pride in this. He believed the bell he struck was the most beautiful. Once, when a pilgrim said the morning bell was as clear as spring water, Leon smiled with satisfaction. He thought he had fully understood the purpose of ringing the bell to bring peace to others. One morning, after striking the bell, Leon saw the head monk approach. He stood quietly under the eaves, eyes half closed, as if listening to something far away. Then he asked, voice soft as mist, "When you strike the bell, what do you hear?" Leon answered immediately without hesitation, "I hear the bell, master." The monk looked at him, his eyes gentle yet deep like a still pond. "And do you hear yourself?" Leon paused. A light breeze passed and a maple leaf drifted down to the steps. He bowed his head, confused. "Myself? What do you mean, master?" The monk didn't reply. He simply smiled, clasped his hands behind his back, and slowly walked away. In the courtyard, the bell's echo still lingered, as if asking Leon back, "What do you truly hear?" From that day, striking the bell was no longer a simple routine. Each morning, as he picked up the mallet, Leon felt a new kind of silence inside, as if the bell had become a question without an answer. He began observing more closely. While striking the bell, he noticed thoughts in his mind. Is this sound loud enough? Will everyone in the temple hear it? Will the master praise me? And those thoughts made the bell sound inside him become cloudy. Day after day, Leon tried to listen more deeply. He no longer rushed off after striking the bell. He stood still, listening to the sound fade into the air, and then to the silence that followed. In that silence, he heard something else. Not the bell, but his own heartbeat. He heard his breath rise and fall, the rustling of his robes in the wind, and the subtle vibrations inside his chest. One morning, thick fog blanketed the valley. Leon walked into the courtyard as usual. He placed his hand on the bell, feeling the cold metal. Then, without calculation, he took a deep breath and struck it gently. Boom. The sound spread, not rushed, not delayed, just as it needed to. And in that very moment, Leon felt himself dissolve into the bell's echo. No more boundary between his hand, the mallet, the bell, or the air. Only one long vibration rippling across the valley, and in that wave, He was no longer the one who rings the bell, but simply a part of the silence breathing. After that morning's meditation, Lian approached the monk. He bowed, voice trembling but clear. "Master, today I heard it." The monk looked at him and gently nodded. "What did you hear?" Lian replied, "I heard the bell and the silence between the echoes. In that silence I saw myself." The monk smiled, eyes glowing like moonlight reflected on a lake. "Very good. Now you no longer ring the bell for others to hear, but to awaken your own mind." From then on, each morning when the bell rang through the mist, the monks felt something different. The sound didn't just echo across mountains, it echoed deep into their hearts. No one knew why, but everyone felt more still, more clear. And only Lian understood, because in that bell, there was no ringer, no listener, only mind resonating. Lian's story reminds us that meditation isn't a striving to reach a special state, but a journey of returning to the awareness already within us. The bell represents all the sounds of life, things that come and go, rise and fall. But within those sounds, something remains silence. And in that silence, we find our true nature. In Buddhist teachings, this is called the patience of the unborn Dharma, abiding in the awareness that is beyond birth and death. The bell arises and ceases. The one who rings arises and ceases, but the faculty of hearing is neither born nor destroyed. When we see this, every sound, whether a bell ring or our inner voice, becomes meditation. In modern psychology, this is known as meta-awareness, the ability to recognize awareness itself. When you're not just paying attention to a sound, but becoming aware of the one who hears, that's when you touch the deeper layers of mind. Meditation is not about absolute silence, but about hearing the silence in every sound. In modern life, you are like Lian, surrounded by endless bells, messages, notifications, reminders, others' voices, and your own thoughts. You hear much, but rarely truly listen. Each night before bed, try this practice of listening to yourself. 1. Sit or lie still. 2. Close your eyes and listen to your breath. 3. Don't adjust or analyze, just listen to your breath as if it were a gentle bell echoing in your chest. When thoughts arise, let them pass like a bell fading into the air. No need to chase them, no need to hold them. Just observe. Science shows that when people engage in deep listening, the parasympathetic nervous system is activated, lowering cortisol stress hormone and increasing serotonin, supporting restful sleep and reducing anxiety. This practice isn't just for better sleep, it's how we begin to hear the truth within. Lian's story teaches us that meditation is a call to return inward. We often think we must go far, learn more, or achieve something to find peace. But in truth, it's all a journey of returning to the breath, to sensation, to the still awareness already within us. The Buddha said, "In this body of 5 aggregates lies the world of arising and passing, but in this quiet mind, there is no arising and no passing." That's why every path of practice begins with listening. Listening to the bell, to the breath, to suffering, to yourself. Meditation isn't an escape from the world, but hearing emptiness in the very sounds of life. When you listen deeply, you stop reacting, stop judging. You simply exist. And in that existence, anxiety fades naturally. Let every sound in your day, whether a car passing wind at the window or a ticking clock, become a meditation bell. When you listen with a quiet heart, every sound is the Buddha calling. After hearing Leon's morning bell, people often feel their hearts quiet down. But as the morning passes and the bell fades, we get swept back into the familiar swirl of daily tasks, cooking, working, replying to messages, organizing, calculating. One day someone asked the Zen master, I find it hard to keep a calm mind in the middle of daily chores. How can I practice when I'm busy and full of worries? It's a simple question, yet profound. Most of life doesn't happen in extraordinary moments, but in the ordinary things we repeat each day. If we can only practice when sitting in meditation, but lose ourselves while washing dishes or making meals, then our mind is not truly free. The story of Ren the cook at the monastery is a living example of this. From a man who cooked with urgency and stress, he discovered peace in every small action simply by being fully present. Ren was in charge of the monastery kitchen. Each morning when mist still clung to the tiled roofs, he would rise, light the fire, and prepare meals for over 30 practitioners. The flickering flame cast golden light on old copper pots. The sound of the knife on the cutting board, the bubbling water, the wind blowing through the window, all formed a familiar symphony Ren had heard for 10 years. But lately, the music felt less pleasant. Every day, the same routine: cook, clean, wash, then cook again. Each dish, each movement exactly the same. Some afternoons, while others were eating in the meditation hall, Ren sat alone by the stove, staring at the boiling soup and feeling empty. He muttered, "It's always the same. Cook, clean, wash. When will it ever change?" One hot afternoon, the abbot stepped into the kitchen. He quietly stood behind Ren, observing. Ren was stirring the soup, sweat dripping down his neck, his face tense. His hand moved rapidly as if he were fighting rather than cooking. The master softly asked, "What are you doing?" Ren, wiping his brow. Ren replied quickly, "I'm cooking soup, master." The master nodded, then asked, "Do you know with what kind of mind you're cooking?" Ren froze. He had never considered that. "Who are you cooking for?" The master continued. "For the community," Ren answered. "And what about you? Are you tasting your own presence in each spoonful of soup?" Ren was silent. In that moment, the bubbling pot seemed louder. The master looked at the flame and gently pointed. "Water boils because of fire, but if the fire is too strong, the soup turns bitter. Your mind is the same. When you cook with haste, the food carries the taste of fatigue." Then he left, leaving Ren standing by the stove, feeling the steam touch his face like a quiet reminder. From that day, Ren began to notice things he had never thought of. He saw that when his mind was tense, the kitchen fire burned harder. Vegetables, overcooked soup boiled too fast. But when he took a deep breath, relaxed his shoulders, and exhaled slowly, everything softened. The flame calmed the water, simmered gently, and the aroma of herbs became more fragrant. One morning, as the sun filtered through the kitchen window, Ren was chopping vegetables when he heard a bird singing in the garden. He paused and simply listened. The bird, the wind, the knife on the board all merged. In that moment, he smiled. Nothing had changed, yet everything was different. The kitchen was no longer just a workplace, but a place of meditation. From then on, Ren no longer cooked out of duty. He cooked out of the joy of presence. He didn't try to make the food better, only to make his mind more at ease. Each cut of the knife, each wisp of smoke, each waft of scent became a lesson in mindfulness. Some mornings before the sun fully rose, he would sit by the stove, waiting for water to boil. The warmth of the fire filled the kitchen, casting shimmering light on the wooden walls. He realized the boiling soup, like himself, was breathing. And in that breath, even the most ordinary acts held the shape of awakening. One afternoon, as the community dined, everyone noticed something different about the meal. They couldn't say why, but the soup felt lighter, the greens more vibrant, the aroma more gentle. A young monk playfully asked, "What secret ingredient did you add today?" Brother Ren smiled softly, his eyes shining with a fresh calm. "Just a bit of presence." Laughter echoed through the hall. No one said more, but all felt something deeper than taste, a silence flowing from the cook into the food, into each person. From then on, the monastery kitchen became the most peaceful place, not just for preparing meals, but where every breath, sound, and movement was meditation. And Ren, once tired of repetition, had found what he'd unknowingly been seeking for 10 years: stillness in the most ordinary things. Ren's story teaches us the art of working with mindfulness. The Buddha taught, when walking, know you are walking. When eating, know you are eating. It sounds simple, but in that simplicity lies the door to inner freedom. Most of our exhaustion doesn't come from work, but from how we show up in it. When the mind runs to the past, regret, blame, we feel heavy. When it runs to the future, worry, planning, we feel tense. But when we stay with this moment, everything becomes light, like breath. In modern psychology, this is called flow state. When one is fully immersed in the task at hand, the mind no longer splits between me and the work, the doer, and the doing. Peace and creativity arise naturally. This is meditation in action. Ren discovered that flavor doesn't come from recipes, but from the cook's mind. When the mind is calm, the food is fresh. When the mind is restless, the flavor is lost. Likewise, everything we do, driving, writing emails, washing dishes, can become a training of the heart. You may have felt like Ren, your days repeating small tasks, draining your spirit. But try shifting your view. Don't ask, when can I rest? Ask instead, am I truly present in what I'm doing? Begin with the simplest things. When washing dishes, know you're washing dishes, not thinking about tomorrow. When eating, taste your food slowly. Be grateful for each bite. When lying down to sleep, feel each breath. No judgment, no effort. Science shows that just 10 minutes of mindful activity a day can reduce stress hormones by 30%, improve heart rate, and deepen sleep quality. When the mind is calm, the nervous system relaxes. And when it relaxes, sleep comes naturally. When you live fully in each motion, everything becomes meditation, and every moment becomes an opportunity to heal. Happiness isn't found in results, but in presence within the process. Ren thought he had to make perfect dishes to be praised. But he found happiness the moment his hands touched the vegetables, when steam kissed his face, when the blade touched the board in silence. The Buddha taught, where your mind is there, you are alive. If your mind is absent, you live nowhere. Mindfulness is the act of returning home, not to an outer house, but to the home inside the heart. When you are present in every action, every task becomes meditation. The bell ringer, the cook, the leaf sweeper all are practicing if they know how to listen to themselves through what they do. Remember, there is no ordinary task, only an ordinary mind. If the mind is bright, even grains of rice and drops of water carry the taste of awakening. After hearing the story of the cook wren, we learned that happiness does not come from the result, but from being present in each moment. Yet another question arises in many hearts. Master, if I have learned to live in the present moment, why does my heart still feel afraid and sad when something is about to end? This is the question of attachment, one of the deepest roots of suffering. We are not afraid of losing the present, but of no longer holding on to what we love, a relationship, a memory, a habit. Even a small object can cause us to cling, unable to let go. In the small garden behind the monastery, there was someone who once struggled with this very attachment, Haru, the caretaker of the ancient bonsai trees in the Zen courtyard. His story is a quiet but profound lesson about the beauty of letting go and the blessing of impermanence. Every morning, Haru rose when dew still clung to the tiled roof, carrying a small watering can faded by time. He walked slowly into the garden where dozens of bonsai pots sat silently in the dim light of dawn. To others, they were simply small, carefully curved trees. But to Haru, each one was a soulful companion. He cared for them as if tending his own breath, trimming each small branch, wiping each leaf clean, adjusting the position of every moss-covered stone. Sometimes he would sit silently for hours just to observe a newly sprouted bud. Occasionally, he whispered to the trees, "Are you well today? Don't fear the wind. It only wants to help you grow stronger." In the garden, some trees had been with him for over 30 years. He had planted them when he was a young monk. Now his hair was gray and his hands more unsteady. But each morning he still visited every pot, caring for each leaf canopy, as if safeguarding pieces of his life's memory. Yet every time autumn arrived, Haru felt a deep, nameless sadness. As the early seasonal winds blew, the leaves began to change from green to yellow, then deep red, and finally they fell spinning in the breeze. He watched them fall, his heart heavy. Though he knew it was nature's way, every leaf that dropped felt like losing an old friend. One year, autumn came earlier than usual. Strong winds and persistent rain lasted for days. Within weeks, most of the trees were bare. The monastery grounds were blanketed with golden leaves, like a soft carpet. In a corner of the garden among the now bare trees, only one bonsai still held onto a single green leaf. Haru gazed at it for a long time. That tiny leaf trembling in the wind still clung to its branch, refusing to fall. He felt a strange tenderness, as if the entire autumn season lived within that one fragile breath. A sudden thought arose in his mind. If I can keep this leaf, maybe autumn will stay a little longer. So he carefully tied a thin thread around the leaf stem, anchoring it to the branch so it wouldn't fall when the wind blew. He looked at the thread like a vow to time. Each day he checked it, fearing the wind would snap it or the rain would rot it. He cared for it more than himself, wiping off dew, shielding it from heavy rain, even erecting a wooden screen to block the wind. Then one night, a storm raged. The wind howled across the monastery roof. Rain pounded the wooden doors. Haru jumped up, threw on his cloak, and ran out into the dark garden. A flash of lightning revealed the scene. The thread had snapped, and the leaf had flown away with the storm. He stood there, rain mixing with tears, staring at the bare branch. Yet in that moment, instead of sorrow, like every year before, he suddenly felt light. A quiet laugh escaped, small, clear, and deep, like a wind chime at midnight. He whispered to himself, "Every attachment is just a useless thread." The next morning, people saw Haru sitting in the garden cutting away old strings tied around the pots. He worked in silence, hearing only the sound of scissors and the gentle breeze brushing the leaves. When the last string fell to the ground, he looked up and for the first time saw his garden truly free. The wind blew through branches, swayed softly. The pale golden sunlight filtered through the new gaps in the leaves. Nothing needed to be held onto, nothing needed to be preserved. The trees that shed their leaves had done so. Those that remained bare remained bare. But in Haru's eyes, all were perfect. From that day, his garden became more tranquil than ever. Not because there were no more leaves, but because he had let go of his desire to control. With each season, he simply sat and watched, smiling at nature's changes, like greeting an old friend who comes and leaves at the right time. And sometimes when someone asked his secret to keeping bonsai trees alive for so long, Haru would simply smile. "Don't try to keep them. Let them fully live in each breath of the season." Because he had realized peace doesn't come from holding on to green leaves, but from smiling when they fall. Haru's story may seem to be about a single leaf, but it is truly about the human mind in the face of loss. When we try to hold on to something, we believe we are protecting love. But in reality, we are resisting impermanence, and that is the root of suffering. The Buddha taught, whatever is born must die. Knowing this is the beginning of wisdom. But wisdom does not come from hearing those words. It comes from deeply experiencing dissolution without collapsing. Haru did not understand impermanence from a Dharma talk, but from seeing a leaf fall, he felt that truth inside his heart. A falling leaf is not merely a natural phenomenon. It is a reminder that everything beautiful only exists for a moment, and because it's fleeting, it is precious. If everything lasted forever, we would not treasure anything at all. So letting go is not loss. It is creating space for life to continue. In meditation, letting go is not rejection, but full acceptance. When we stop clinging, everything returns to its rightful place. Like a leaf falling to the earth to nourish the tree, like rain falling from clouds to replenish a spring. In life, we too often tie threads like Haru's. We tie them to our children, our careers, our self-image, our past, even to things already broken. We say, "I just want to hold on to something beautiful." But truly, we are afraid of facing the emptiness that loss leaves behind. If you notice, most nighttime anxiety comes from that. As we lie down, the mind won't settle because it still clings to what is no longer someone who left an opportunity. Missed words we never said. The mind circles the past, just as Haru tried to hold the leaf with a string. When you learn to observe without interfering, something miraculous happens. Emotions pass and you remain whole. Memories return but no longer weigh you down. Sadness becomes soft as water, dissolving into breath. Try this before sleeping. Inhale silently. Say, "I acknowledge what I'm holding." Exhale silently. Say, "I allow it to pass." Neuroscience research shows that when people focus on mindful breathing, the brain's fear center amygdala significantly reduces activity. Letting go, then, is not just spiritual, it is truly therapeutic. A fallen leaf does not die, it simply changes form, returning to nourish the soil. Love that is lost does not disappear, it becomes growth within your heart. What once hurt you when seen with wisdom becomes a seed of awakening. The Buddha said, "When we see impermanence, we no longer suffer from loss." It sounds simple, but only when we truly touch impermanence with an open heart can we understand that even loss is a blessing. Letting go does not make you less. It makes you lighter. Like a tree after shedding leaves, not dying, but preparing for a new season of blossoming. If you are holding on to something that is ready to leave, remember Haru. Don't tie strings around memories. Let the wind take them as it always has. Because only when your hands are empty can your heart have room for peace. When we talk about letting go, most people think about releasing small things, a memory, a person, a feeling. But sometimes life forces us to let go of everything in a single moment. And when there is nothing left to cling to, a person truly understands the most precious thing is not what we possess, but the very ability to keep breathing. After the story of Haru and the last leaf, we saw that letting go is an art, a path that opens inner freedom. But what happens when letting go is not a choice but a necessity? When the storm comes, when everything collapses, when we are stripped of everything, how can we still remain calm? The story of Taro, a ship captain who lost everything in a great storm, shows us this truth. Not through philosophy, but through a moment of awakening in the middle of destruction. Taro was an old fisherman living on the southern coast. His whole life was bound to the sea. It gave him food, joy, and it had also taken away the people he loved most. On his sun-darkened face and calloused hands, one could read the long years of wind salt and loneliness. He owned an old wooden boat faded with time, but for Taro it was more than a tool for making a living. It was a lifelong companion, a friend through every storm. Each morning before setting out to sea, he would place his hand on the side of the boat, close his eyes, and whisper a quiet prayer. "Thank you, sea. Thank you, boat, for bringing me home." He believed the sea had a soul that always listened, always responded with fish, with radiant sunrises, or with stormy nights that tested a person's heart. That year, the storm season came early. Winds rose in the afternoon, the sea turned murky, and clouds gathered in thick black sheets. Villagers rushed to pull their boats ashore. But Taro remained calm. He was used to warnings, to fierce waves and strong winds. He had lived with storms all his life, why fear another one? That evening, while everyone shut their doors, Taro still sailed out. He murmured to himself as if speaking to the sea, "I know you won't harm me." The sea was eerily calm, its surface smooth like glass. But by midnight, the real storm struck. The wind roared, waves rose like black walls, the sound of wood splintering the boat groaning with each blow. Rain lashed his face, salty like tears. Taro tried to hold the boat steady, but a massive wave slammed into the side. The cracking of wood was like bones breaking. Everything happened in an instant. Nets, fish crates, oars were swept away. He barely managed a shout before man and boat went under. The water was icy, bitter, heavy. In panic, Taro thrashed his hand, catching a floating plank. He clung to it, a tiny piece of wood, fragile as his last hope. The waves carried him far, far away. He didn't know how long he drifted. He only remembered that in the darkness at times he thought he was dreaming. the wind, the waves blending with his slowing heartbeat, a silence stretching into infinity, then light. When Taro opened his eyes, the sky was clear. Gentle waves carried him to shore. Wet sand clung to his face, the taste of salt still in his lungs. Before him stretched an endless beach littered with debris, the remains of his old boat. The sea lapped calmly as if no storm had ever passed. Taro sat up. His clothes torn, his hands scraped, his body aching. He looked around, no boat, no nets, no home. Everything gone except the breath rising and falling in his chest. He placed a hand on his heart, feeling it still beating. 1 beat, 2 beats. Still here. He sat for a long time, listening to the wind and his heartbeat merge as one. Then amid the wreckage, he began to laugh. A rough but warm laugh echoing strangely across the empty sand. A passerby, astonished, asked, "What are you laughing at? You've lost everything." Taro turned, his eyes shining with a strange light. "No, I still have my breath. And when I have breath, I still have a whole life to live." The man fell silent. The sea behind them whispered in agreement. From that day on, Taro never went to sea again. He built a small hut on the shore from the remains of his boat. Each day, he sat facing the ocean, not to catch fish, but to listen. He began teaching the village children how to read the wind, how to hear the waves, how to watch the clouds, to predict the weather. But above all, he taught them what the storm had taught him: gratitude for life, as long as we can still breathe. People began to call him the Wave Keeper. When children asked if he still remembered his old boat, he only smiled. "I do remember. But I've come to understand that sometimes the sea destroys what we cling to, only to return to us something more precious, this very life." From then on, whenever the wind rose offshore, villagers would see Taro standing on the shore, hand over his heart, eyes fixed on the distant horizon. And in the murmur of the waves, one could hear his voice, soft as the breeze. "Thank you, sea. Thank you for still letting me breathe." Taro's story is a simple illustration of a deep truth the Buddha once taught. The greatest possession of a person is not wealth, but mindfulness of life in the present moment. When everything around collapses, the mind instinctively scrambles for something to hold. It's a survival reflex. But if we look closely, all those places to hold are not real. Wealth can be lost. People can leave. Status can change. Only the breath is not borrowed, not false. It is the true stream of life, present in each moment. Meditation teaches that breath is the bridge between body and mind, between the temporary and the real. When Taro sat on the shore with nothing in his hands, he touched the simplest truth. We don't need to own life, only to live it fully in each breath. In that moment, he was no longer someone who had lost everything, but someone completely free. Freedom does not come from holding on, but from having nothing left to lose. Many of us live amid invisible storms, storms of work relationships, endless expectations. We fear losing fear, lacking fear, being left behind, and that very fear keeps us from ever feeling at peace, even in the safest place. At night, when you lie down, you may not be caught in real waves, but your mind may still sink into waves of thought. Will tomorrow be okay? Am I good enough? Capable enough? Lovable enough? In that moment, if you can pause and simply feel your breath, you're doing what Taro did in the storm, returning to the only truly safe place within yourself. When you inhale deeply, exhale slowly, your body sends a safe signal to your nervous system. Neuroscientific research has shown just 3 consecutive mindful breaths can significantly lower heart rate and blood pressure, helping the body exit the fight or flight response. That means breath, though simple, is the boat that carries you through every inner storm. Imagine each breath as a gentle wave. You don't need to resist it. Just let yourself flow with its natural rhythm. No need to control, only to feel. Because as Taro learned, peace doesn't come from controlling the sea, but from learning to drift with it. When we lose everything, what remains is what truly belongs to us. Taro lost his wealth, his boat, but he gained a new life, one not built on fear. The Buddha taught, the person who knows contentment is the richest of all. But knowing contentment is not suppressing dreams or denying joy. It is an attitude of gratitude for life, even when it feels empty. In meditation, knowing contentment is the ability to look directly at lack and still feel peace, because we understand life continues to flow, regardless of what we have or lose. If tonight you feel like you're sinking in work and sorrow, in a relationship with no way out, remember Taro's image. Sit still, place your hand on your chest, and feel that heartbeat. That is the final boat, and the only one you need. When you live with each breath, each step, each small moment, the turbulence outside no longer pulls you under. You are still in the storm, but your mind has become the sun shining over the water. After the storm that took everything from Taro, we saw that when all is broken, what remains within us is the breath as life. But sometimes the storm doesn't come from outside. It comes from within, from the wounds, the cracks in the soul we try to hide. We're afraid others will see the imperfect parts of us, afraid the light will shine into the broken places. And yet the paradox is, this light can only enter where there is a crack. If we've never broken, how can we fully understand what it means to be whole? That's what Aoi, a mirror maker, realized when the most precious mirror of her life cracked in half. This story isn't just about a mirror. It's about the human soul, the part that continues to reflect life even when it has fractured. Aoi was a renowned craftswoman in her region. Her life was surrounded by metal plates, small hammers, and the reflected light of the mirrors she shaped by hand. Everyone knew Aoi, the silver-haired woman whose hands were always dusted with metal and whose eyes shone quietly like a still pond. She made mirrors for temples, noble families, and especially for Zen monasteries, where mirrors were more than tools. They were symbols of the mind. People used to say, Aoi's mirrors reflect so clearly. You can see your soul in them. Aoi never called herself an artisan. She simply said, I polish until the mirror reflects the heart, not just the face. That morning, winter mist covered the village. In her workshop, Aoi was finishing the largest mirror of her life, commissioned for an ancient mountain temple. The mirror was round like the full moon, its frame carved from old cedar, faintly fragrant. She had polished it for 3 months, gently wiping away dust each day with soft cloth, breathing lightly so as not to fog the surface. Sunlight streamed through the window, bouncing onto the walls in shimmering waves. As she turned the mirror to clean the back, a sharp crack echoed through the room. She froze. A long fracture had split across the mirror, thin but clear. In that moment, the room seemed to stand still. The oil lamp flickered, casting broken reflections across the crack like scattered shards of light. Aoi gently placed the cloth on the table. Her hands trembled, but her eyes showed no panic. She simply gazed at the crack, a diagonal scar across the glass, like a wound on a loved one's face. She knew that to most people the mirror had lost its worth, but deep within, something told her she couldn't discard it. A few days later, the client arrived and was furious. "Madam Aoi, do you think we can place this cracked mirror in a temple? It's ruined." Aoi didn't argue. She simply placed her hand on the mirror, looked at the fracture, and quietly said, "The mirror still reflects. The only difference is now, it also reflects the truth." The client frowned, assuming she was making excuses. They left in frustration. Left alone, Aoi sat beside the mirror into the night. The oil lamp shone through the crack, splitting the light in two. One ray went straight, the other bent slightly. She watched the phenomenon for a long time, then softly smiled. Maybe, she thought, light is most beautiful when it passes through imperfection. That night, though, cold winds blew through the gaps in the door. Aoi's heart felt strangely warm. She realized she had spent years chasing perfection, flawless, perfectly clear mirrors, and had forgotten that human life, like metal, will always have cracks. And those very cracks are what make us real. The next morning, she didn't discard the mirror. Instead, she placed it on the table where morning light could shine through it. When she looked into it, she saw her face reflected with the crack running across, not with regret, but with an odd calm. Every morning, she sat there gazing into the mirror, like gazing into her own heart. She came to see that awakening doesn't come from being flawless, but from daring to look at one's flaws and still being able to smile. From then on, Aoi's mirrors were no longer perfect in the traditional sense. Some had small blemishes, some frames bore slight scorch marks, but anyone who held one of her mirrors sensed something different, as if the light didn't just reflect the surface, but reached into the soul. People began to whisper, "Aoi doesn't just make mirrors, she makes mirrors that breathe." And she, with a gentle smile, would sit beside that first cracked mirror, where light still passed through, splitting into two radiant paths like two halves of a soul reunited. When asked the secret behind her luminous mirrors, Aoi would simply reply with a breath-like whisper, "Let the mirror reflect even the imperfections. Only then can a person truly see themselves." In Buddhist teachings, the mirror is often a metaphor for the human mind. When the mind is still, it reflects everything without distortion. But in reality, how many of us have such perfect mirrors? Every life is a series of collisions, wounds, mistakes, regrets, failures, unhealed sorrows. These experiences crack us, making us feel undeserving, no longer pure enough to reflect goodness. But meditation teaches enlightenment is not about becoming perfect, but about seeing clearly even the imperfections. Just like Aoi, when she saw that a cracked mirror still reflected, she touched a deeper truth. Light doesn't require perfection to shine. It only needs space to pass through. So it is with the human heart. Through pain, disappointment, and loss, we open ourselves to deeper understanding and love. If we've never broken, we'll never truly know compassion. Perhaps you too carry cracks in your life, a memory, unspoken, a shameful mistake, something you constantly blame yourself for. We try to hide it, cover it with smiles, success, busyness. But the more we hide it, the bigger it grows. Eventually, we can no longer face ourselves in the mirror of our soul. At night, when the lights go out and it's just us, and the silence, the crack appears most clearly. It might keep us awake, drifting through thoughts of what if or why did I? But if in that night you dare to look directly at the crack as Aoi did, you'll witness something miraculous. It hasn't destroyed your light. It's only changed how it reflects softer, truer, more human. Modern science calls this post-traumatic growth. Research shows that people who've suffered deep loss often become more compassionate, resilient, and wise. In other words, the crack is the entry point for the light. The Buddha once said, "Just as the lotus grows out of the mud, so too does awakening arise from ignorance. Without the mud, the lotus cannot bloom. Without the crack, the heart cannot open." In daily life, we don't need to hide our flaws. Instead, look at them with mindfulness, with the light of understanding. Only when we accept all of ourselves, including the imperfect parts, do we truly become whole. If tonight you feel tired, flawed, or incomplete, sit down, close your eyes, and imagine a mirror inside your heart. It may be cracked, but it still reflects the moonlight, the lamp glow, and the light of your own spirit. Let each breath pass gently, like the craftsman wiping away layers of dust, until you see that true beauty doesn't lie in perfection, but in the clarity that comes from seeing yourself as you really are. After hearing Aoi's story and the cracked mirror, we come to understand that our fractures do not diminish our value. They are precisely where light enters. But what happens when we try to make everything perfect from the start? When we resist the natural flow of life and try to mold it according to our will, like trying to force the wind to be still or make water flow upstream. Have you ever noticed that the more you try to control something, the more it slips through your fingers? The more you want things to go according to plan, the more life reminds you, you are not always the one in control. That is the lesson Dai, an elderly potter, came to understand. He did not learn it from scriptures or teachings, but from a broken vase, a creation of his own hands. Dai was well known in the region for his skilled hands and his obsession with perfection. Whenever he touched clay, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The air thickened with stillness, broken only by the steady spinning of the wheel, the wind whispering through the roof tiles, and the slow, deep breaths of the potter. His vases, bowls, and plates always drew admiration. The forms were elegant, the glaze smooth as silk, the shape so precise it seemed his hands could hear the will of the clay. Villagers would joke when Dai works, even the earth behaves like a student before its teacher. But only Dai knew that saying couldn't be more wrong, because the earth never obeyed. For all the years he had shaped hundreds of ceramics deemed flawless by others, Dai had never truly felt satisfied. A tiny dent, a slight misalignment in the glaze, a small bump invisible to others, any of these would keep him up at night. He remade and reworked pieces over and over. Day after day, he never felt anything was enough. One summer morning, he opened the kiln to find the vase he cared about most had cracked in half. The dry, snapping sound felt like a blade across his heart. He slumped to the ground and sighed deeply. Just then, the village's old Zen master happened to pass by. Seeing Dai frowning at the broken pottery, he asked gently, "What are you doing, Dai?" "I'm trying to make the perfect vase, master. But the clay, it always resists me. It never listens." The Zen master chuckled softly, his voice warm and calm. Perhaps the clay is not resisting you. Perhaps it is trying to teach you something. Dai said nothing. He didn't understand. The next day he returned to his workshop more determined than ever. He shaped the clay with intense focus, his hands tight, his eyes locked on the form of the vase. Sweat dripped to the ground, mixing with the clay. But in one uncontrolled moment, the shape collapsed. Furious, he slammed the wheel and shouted, "Why won't you obey me?" He stormed out and wandered along the stream behind the village. The water trickled over stones, gentle but persistent. He sat down and watched the flow. It wasn't rushing, nor was it still. It didn't try to define itself. It simply followed its natural course. For the first time, Dai realized water doesn't try to be water. Precisely because it doesn't try, it flows. That evening, he returned to the workshop. The anger had faded. So had the force. He sat at the wheel, placed his hands on the moist clay, and closed his eyes. The wheel began to turn. He didn't control it. He let his hands follow the sensation. When the clay was soft, he let it move. When it resisted, he paused. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he was making. He was simply with. Clay, water, breath, and Dai all moved to the same rhythm. When the vase took shape, he placed it in the kiln without expectation. No worry, no fear of failure. Just a soft smile like he had finished a sacred ritual. The next morning, when the fire cooled, he opened the kiln. Sunlight gleamed on the glaze. The vase emerged imperfectly shaped, its rim slightly tilted, its body gently curved, but its surface shimmered like moonlight on water. The opening of the vase bloomed gently like a lotus bud. He stared in awe. Nothing about it followed the rules. Yet it was strangely harmonious. A smile spread across his face, his first in many years of chasing perfection. He whispered, as if speaking to the water from the day before. When I stopped trying to control, everything came together. From that day on, Dai no longer made pottery to prove anything to sell or to perfect. He made it to listen. Each piece became a meditation between him, the clay, and the breath. People said that Dai's later ceramics had something different. They were no longer perfectly glossy or symmetrically precise, but each item had a spirit, as if it were breathing. When light struck the glaze, it shimmered like moving water, and when asked for his secret, he simply smiled and said, "Let the clay tell its story." When you stop forcing form reveals itself. In Buddhist teaching, there is a simple but profound truth. All phenomena arise through interdependence. Nothing exists alone. Everything comes to be through connection. Like clay needs water, water needs fire, and we need surrender to find ourselves. Control is an expression of ego, the desire to make life conform to our will. But the more we try to control, the more we become entangled. Like Dai, when he forced the clay, all he found was resistance. Only when he learned to work with, not against, to not demand, not manipulate, did clay become vase, fire become color, and Dai become a true potter. Zen Master Dogen once said, "When you surrender to the current, the stream will teach you how to swim." In meditation, surrender is not passive resignation. It is conscious cooperation with the natural state of all things. You can't make a flower bloom faster, but you can create the conditions for it to bloom. You can't force the mind to be calm, but you can sit still long enough for calm to arise on its own. Perhaps you too have had your own broken vases in life. A failed project, a relationship that didn't work out, a plan that collapsed despite your best effort. After such moments, we often blame ourselves. If only I had done better. If only I had controlled it more. But sometimes what we call failure is just the teaching of earth and fire, that trying harder isn't always better, that everything needs its own rhythm. Earth needs rest, water needs to flow, and the mind needs to pause. At night, when you lie down, your mind may still be spinning like Dai's wheel, thinking about what went wrong or what needs to be done tomorrow. But if you try letting go, simply observing your breath as a potter touches the clay, you may feel something miraculous. The mind slows, and sleep arrives as naturally as a lotus blooming in mist. Neuroscientists have shown that the flow state, a natural rhythm of consciousness, emerges when we stop forcing and become fully present. In that moment, the brain reduces activity in the ego-related regions and activates areas of creativity and deep healing. In other words, when we stop trying too hard, the body and mind naturally restore balance. From Dai's story, we learn a simple lesson. Control is a burden. Harmony is freedom. The Buddha once said, "The one who flows with the Dharma like water with the current shall not be swept away by suffering." Surrender is not giving up. It is returning to your natural state. When you release the need to prove, you tap into the purest energy of all the life force that moves without your command. In work, instead of trying to make everything perfect, try doing it gently with full attention. In relationships, instead of forcing change, learn the rhythm of understanding. In meditation, instead of chasing stillness, just sit with the breath like Dai sat with the clay. A potter knows fire doesn't destroy clay. It reveals its true form. Likewise, hardship doesn't ruin you. It fires your heart until you become who you truly are. After hearing about the potter Dai, we saw that when we stop forcing things, everything returns to its natural order. But even when actions have been released, a subtler thing remains: the noise in the mind. Sounds that echo endlessly in our heads, even when the world outside is silent. Have you ever noticed that even in a quiet room, your mind can still be loud? Sounds that seem to come from the outside, rain cars, voices can stir inner waves. You might ask yourself, why does the sound of rain bother me so much? Why can't I find true silence even in the stillest places? Silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the absence of disturbance within. That's what Sora, a young novice, learned during a long night of rain on the roof of an old mountain temple. The temple where Sora lived sat on a mountain slope surrounded by dense bamboo forests and endless pine hills stretching toward the horizon. During rainy seasons, mist draped over the eaves, and water dripped steadily from the ancient roof tiles, each drop like a slow meditative rhythm played by nature itself. To others, it was a serene sound, a calming pulse of the mountains. But for Sora, a newly ordained young monk, the rain was a relentless interrupter. Each morning when the temple bell rang to signal the start of chanting, Sora sat cross-legged in the main hall, palms together, lips murmuring sutras. But as soon as the rain began to fall, his mind wavered. Water pounded on jars, splattered on leaves, shattered on cold stone. To him, the sound was not peaceful, but intrusive, like drums breaking his concentration. He tried to ignore it, but the more he resisted, the louder it became. Eventually, Sora stumbled in his recitation, flustered, muttering, "How can I meditate with all this noise?" That day brought the first heavy rains of the season, long and unyielding. The downpour overpowered even the rhythmic sound of the wooden fish drum. Sora frowned and glanced up as if blaming the sky. At the front, the head monk remained still, but then he turned his eyes kind and deep like a still lake. "What are you hearing, Sora?" Sora bowed his head and answered softly, "I hear the rain, Master. It's keeping me from focusing." The monk smiled gently, his voice as light as the breeze. "You are mistaken. That is not rain. That is the Dharma speaking." Sora looked up surprised. "The Dharma? But it's just the sound of water hitting roof tiles." The monk nodded. "Then tell me, are you hearing with your ears or with your mind?" Sora paused. For the first time, he had no answer. After the chanting session, with the drizzle still falling, the monk invited Sora to the veranda. Together, they watched the rain, soft, unrushed. Drops fell on bamboo leaves, into stone jars, onto the earth, scattering tiny puffs of dust. The sound of rain and wind wove together in a rhythm that had no intent, but felt somehow complete. Pointing to the temple roof, the monk whispered, "See, every drop has its own voice. Some fall fast, some slow. Some strike hard, others land gently. Yet together, they form a song. If you truly listen, you'll see the rain was never noisy. Only your mind was." Sora looked out at the wet courtyard where rain reflected the dim morning light. He suddenly realized the rain wasn't rushing. It was his mind that had been in haste. The monk continued, "When your mind is still, the rain is still. When your mind is noisy, even silence becomes loud. The world doesn't change, only the observer does." Sora stood silently. Something inside him softened. From that day on, whenever it rained, he no longer resisted. During chanting, he let the sounds blend the drum, the rain his breath. He no longer tried to block the noise or force focus. He simply sat, letting everything pass as it was. One morning, light rain fell and mist drifted through the temple grounds. In the main hall, Sora was chanting. The drum beat steady. Rain tapped on roof tiles. Wind rustled through bamboo. Everything flowed together like nature itself was reciting alongside him. In that moment, he realized something. Each drop of rain was like each syllable flowing from his lips, both from a deep source, both dissolving into silence. Neither dominated the other. They merged like rivers into the sea. He smiled, finally at peace in the rain. From then on, whenever the sky wept, no one saw Sora frown. He sat still, hands together, lips gently moving, letting each raindrop become a verse. Because now he understood, when the heart is at peace, even the rain is chanting. Sora's story illustrates one of meditation's most delicate truths. Every sound is Dharma if the heart is quiet. In the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha taught that all things speak the Dharma, from the wind in the trees, to the stream's current, to the morning bird song. The untamed mind hears noise. The awakened mind hears the voice of the universe. The mind is a mirror. When its surface ripples, all reflections distort. When it's still, it reveals things as they are. Rain voices, traffic, none are to blame. It's the mind's judgment that turns them into suffering. Like Sora, we often seek quiet outside, forgetting that the real disturbance comes from within. Sound does not cause suffering. It's our reaction to sound that does. when the monk said, "The rain is chanting with you." He wasn't just teaching Sora to accept sound, he was pointing to the oneness of all things. In meditation, there is no me chanting separately and rain outside. They're both expressions of one vast stream of awareness. In daily life, you too may be disturbed by your own kind of rain. Not water, but the chatter of thoughts, worries, memories looping endlessly. Before bed, the mind often echoes with such sounds. Was I good enough? What will happen tomorrow? Will they understand me? These inner voices fall like heavy rain on the roof of consciousness, leaving us restless, exhausted. But if you pause and listen without reacting, you'll witness something remarkable. The storm softens. The thoughts settle like rain turning to mist. When you stop resisting, they gently fade. Try this tonight. When you hear the rain or any sound, don't push it away. Just inhale deeply and exhale. Feel the sound pass through your ears, touch you, and disappear like a breath. No clinging, no fleeing. Neuroscientists call this sensory synchronization. When we accept sound and move in rhythm with it, the nervous system calms, the heart rate slows, and the brain shifts to alpha waves, a natural state of relaxation that aids sleep and healing. This is what Sora discovered. You don't need the rain to stop, only the resistance in your heart. From his story, we learn that true silence is not achieved by removing sound, but by hearing without being swept away. The Buddha taught, when hearing, just hear, when seeing, just see. This is the essence of mindfulness, pure awareness free from judgment or reaction. In life, you cannot make the world go quiet, but you can be quiet within the world. You cannot stop the rain, but you can see the beauty of each drop. You cannot control others, but you can learn not to let them stir your mind. And whenever you feel disturbed, remember the monk's words to Sora. The rain is chanting with you. Let every sound become a rhythm for peace. Let the noise of life merge with the breath, and the breath with stillness. That is how the heart finds balance, not by escaping the world, but by joining its rhythm. After hearing the story of Sora and the rain on the temple roof, we saw that when the mind is calm, every sound becomes a voice of the Dharma. But there is something even more subtle. Even when there is no external sound, the mind can create its own inner noise like tangled threads in our head that tighten the more we try to untangle them. Have you ever found yourself tossing and turning at night, trying to think through something, only to end up more tired and tangled in worry? Or trying to explain yourself to someone, only to feel them drift further away the more you speak? We often believe that effort is the key to every problem. But sometimes, effort is the wall. In meditation, there's a paradox we only discover when we're quiet enough. Not everything can be resolved by force. Some things only loosen when we stop. This is what Chio, a silk weaver, discovered one windless summer afternoon. The village where Chio lived was famous for its silk weaving. People there believed that each piece of silk held the soul of its weaver, soft or stiff, bright or dim, pure, or tangled, it all reflected the heart of the maker. And in that village, no one wove more beautifully than Chio. Her silk was as fine as smoke, as light as breath. When the wind passed through it, it shimmered like moonlight on water. Traders from far away would look at a piece on the loom and say, "That's Chio's hand." But her perfection came with a cost. Every time she placed her hand on the loom, she became someone else, so focused she couldn't hear the birds outside, couldn't feel time pass. Her eyes locked onto each fine thread, and the smallest misalignment would tighten her chest. She once told her students, "Each thread is a breath. If the breath breaks, the silk dies." They nodded. No one dared say that sometimes her own breath had long stopped, held by tension, by perfectionism. One day, Chio began to weave the largest silk of her life. It was a piece she intended to offer at the temple during spring festival, a symbol of her year's devotion. For weeks, she barely left her house. Her hands glided over the loom threads, slipping through her fingers like mist. Then one evening, as the sun was fading, a thread tangled. A knot, tiny but deep, twisted like a maze. Chio stopped, her breath heavy. She bent down and tried to untangle it, but the more she tried, the tighter it became. She used a fine needle, pulled gently, even blew on the thread to ease it. Nothing worked. Every effort only made it worse, as if the thread were mocking her. Night fell. The room flickered and the lamplight filled only with the fan's hum and her tired sighs. She kept trying, biting her lip, then stopped. The night passed, but the knot remained as twisted as her mind. The next morning, a soft knock. Her teacher, a retired artisan who had taught her how to touch thread, stepped in. He saw Chio still at the loom, dark circles under her eyes, hands clenched around frayed silk. He smiled gently, voice like mist. "What are you doing, Chio?" she replied, voice hoarse with fatigue. "I'm trying to undo it. But the more I try, the worse it gets." The teacher sat beside her, poured tea. He placed a cup on the table, letting the steam rise before speaking. When your mind tightens, the world tightens with it. He lifted the cup and poured until the tea spilled over the rim. "Look, if you keep pouring into a full cup, it only overflows. Your mind is the same. It can't untangle when it's already clenched." Chio looked up. For the first time, she saw his eyes not on the thread, but directly on her, as if peering through the fog of her thoughts. He continued, warm and steady. "Let the thread breathe. Don't force it to follow you. Listen to it." She said nothing. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Stop your hands. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath." She obeyed. In the silence, she heard wind slip through the window, a morning bird calling far away, and the stillness of waiting thread. Moments later, she opened her eyes, gently touched the knot. With no intent to fix, she ran her fingers along the line, feeling its softness, the warmth of her own hand passing through it. And strangely, just one light tug, and the thread loosened on its own. She sat still, stunned. It felt like something in her heart had also untied. Her teacher smiled. "You see, when your heart softens, everything softens." She bowed her head, a quiet smile blooming not from victory, but release. The silk was finished that afternoon. To others, it looked like all the rest, smooth, radiant, flawless. But for Chio, it was the first piece woven with a peaceful breath, not with tension. That night, she hung the silk by her window. Moonlight poured through it like flowing water. In that silver glow, she whispered to herself, "Maybe the most beautiful silk is not the one without knots, but the one woven with a heart that no longer tightens." Chio's story isn't just about weaving. It's a metaphor for the human mind. Every time we try to solve a problem in life, we hold a knot in our hands. The more we tighten our mind, the more we insist it must be fixed now, the more tangled it gets. The Buddha said, The mind is like water. When still, it reflects everything clearly. When stirred, it shows nothing but its own disturbance. Effort is necessary, but effort without awareness leads to tension. Many believe they are meditating by trying to focus, trying to calm, trying not to think, but really, they're creating another layer of strain. The answer in meditation isn't doing more. It's stopping at the right moment. Stopping doesn't mean giving up. Stopping means listening. Only in listening can we truly see where the knot lies. Like Chio, sometimes we can't see the thread because we've stared at it too long. We need space, a breath, a moment of stillness, and clarity returns. Have you noticed? Modern life has everyone sitting at their own loom, weaving a fabric called life. We weave with work relationships, the longing to be loved and understood. Then one day, we find our fabric tangled without knowing why. We try to fix it, try to make others understand, try to repair, to control, to prove. But the more we try, the further things slip away. Like a knot, the harder we pull, the tighter it gets. If you've ever lost sleep because your thoughts wouldn't stop, you know this deeply. In those moments, your mind is the loom. Each thought, a thread tangled in another. The more you think, just relax, the more tangled it gets. What you need is not to stop thinking, but to listen with quiet compassion. Let the mind speak, complain, unravel, and you just listen without judging. Studies from the Neuroscience Institute show that when people accept rather than resist emotions, the amygdala, the brain's fear and stress center, immediately calms down. Heart rate drops, breathing returns to its natural rhythm, and the body enters deep recovery. That's why many fall asleep, not when they try to sleep, but when they stop trying. They just lie still, feel the body, let the mind pass. Like Chio, they no longer try to untangle, only listen, and the threads begin to loosen. From this story, we learn listening is the highest form of release. In Buddhism, there's a principle called listening to the Dharma with a quiet heart. To listen without interrupting, fixing, or resisting. Just listen. When someone is angry, no need to argue. When you're worried, no need to suppress it. When you listen to your breath, no need to control it. Then the tangled thread of the mind begins to soften. Mindfulness is not about perfecting the mind, but letting it return to its natural state, like water, like wind, like a thread that releases itself. The Buddha said, "Those who know when to stop and listen clearly see the path." We cannot untangle the world, but we can learn not to tighten it further. We cannot make others peaceful, but we can become a place of peace where others may reflect. And like Chio, we can only weave the silk of our lives beautifully when we understand. The most beautiful fabric is not the one without flaws, but the one woven by a heart that knows when to pause. After hearing the story of Chio, the artisan who learned to listen instead of force, we come to see that sometimes the greatest strength lies in stillness. But there is another kind of power, just as subtle, the power of softness. Have you ever felt exhausted for being too soft? When others argue, you choose silence and they say you're weak. When someone hurts you, you forgive, and they say you lack self-respect. When you don't fight back, they think you're afraid. But sometimes in the very moments you think you're weak, you're actually embodying a strength deeper than force. Like water, neither sharp nor hard, yet it can wear down stone. like bamboo, not thick or rigid, yet it stands through the storm. And that's what Rin, a young novice living in a temple on a mountain slope, learned during a great storm one night. Rin's temple lay nestled in a valley backed by lush green bamboo groves and facing a gentle stream that sang all year long. Every morning, the sound of water blended with the chime of temple bells in a peace so deep it seemed time itself paused. From a young age, Rin was gentle and quiet. He moved like a breeze, his steps silent, his actions slow and careful. The other monks often teased, "Rin is like a blade of grass. Even a soft wind could blow him away." Rin would simply smile and bow, never reacting. He wasn't angry or sad, but his silence made others think he was spineless. One afternoon, while Rin was sweeping the temple grounds beneath the golden glow of sunset, an older monk passed by, paused and sneered. "Why do I always see you with your head down? Have you ever dared to look anyone in the eye?" Rin stopped sweeping, looked up, his gaze clear and calm. "I just think when I bow my head I see the earth, and the earth is more forgiving than people." The older monk laughed loudly. "Only the weak make excuses for being weak." Rin didn't respond, but that night, as rain tapped against the old temple roof, the words echoed in his heart like a pebble dropped into a still pond. Each ripple was another doubt. Maybe they're right. Am I too soft? If I'm too gentle, will I just be swept away by the wind? From that day, Rin began to change. He tried to prove he was strong. When others carried water, he carried one more bucket. When others gathered firewood, he carried double the load. He worked faster, harder, and rested less. But the more he tried, the more exhausted he became. His shoulders grew stiff, his hands calloused. His once peaceful face tensed. The natural softness in him faded, replaced by a forced toughness, like bamboo bent too tightly, ready to snap with the next gust. One night, a storm rolled in. Thunder echoed across the mountains, wind howled through the forest, and rain lashed the temple like a whip. Everyone took shelter inside the Buddha hall. Everyone except Rin, who lay restless, unable to sleep. He stepped out onto the porch. The sky was pitch black, occasionally lit by flashes of white lightning illuminating the distant forest. He saw mighty trees around the temple bend and snap under the wind. But the bamboo grove by the stream swayed, bowed low, bent deeply, and then sprang back, continuing to dance with the wind. Rin stood frozen. Amid the rain, he realized the strongest, stiffest trees fell first. The ones that bowed survived. The next morning, the sky cleared. Rin walked out and saw broken trees scattered across the ground's roots torn from earth. Yet the bamboo grove remained intact, having lost only a few soft leaves now floating in the stream. The head monk passed by and paused beside him. After a moment of silence, he asked, "Do you see Rin?" Rin answered softly, "I see that bamboo is soft, but it doesn't break." The monk smiled, his eyes kind. "It's not weakness. Softness is understanding nature's way. Hardness only knows resistance, and so it breaks." Rin stood still, watching the bamboo dance in the morning breeze. The master continued, voice like wind through bamboo. Bamboo lives through storms, not because it's strong, but because it moves with the wind. People are the same. When you walk with life instead of against it, you don't need force because life itself carries you. Rin bowed, something opening quietly within him. From that day, he no longer needed to prove anything. He still worked hard, still stayed humble, still bowed his head. But now his bowing wasn't out of fear or avoidance. It was the calm strength of someone who knew you don't need to stand tall to be grounded. The next rainy season, as winds returned to the valley, Rin sat under the eaves listening to the rain. The patter on the tiles, the sway of the bamboo, the flow of the stream all blended into one gentle rhythm. Rin smiled for the first time. He felt that within softness lay a strength deeper than any power, because sometimes the ones who bow are the ones who endure the storm the longest. Rin's story is a parable of one of Buddhism's most profound lessons, the strength of compassion and suppleness. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha teaches, like a gentle stream, without hindrance, without comparison, the one with a soft heart is the strongest. We often think strength means winning, controlling. But in Zen, true strength is understanding. The rigid may gain the upper hand temporarily, but the soft endure. The aggressive may inspire fear, but the compassionate bring peace. Modern psychology calls this a resilient mind, a mind that bends when needed, yields, under pressure flows with the wind, yet never breaks. A mind that can recover again and again. True strength doesn't come from overpowering, but from staying calm amid chaos. Like the breath, gentle, soft, unseen, yet sustaining all of life. So too, compassion is the soft power of the heart. It doesn't shout or perform, but it transforms the world around us. If you notice, people who struggle with sleep are often those who don't allow themselves to soften. They carry the day into the night, still worrying, still planning, still trying to control. The mind won't release, so the body can't rest. Even when lying down, they are still fighting thoughts, feelings, even themselves. But the more they resist, the stiffer the mind becomes, like a tree in a storm. When you begin to soften, to accept sleep flows in like a stream, naturally, effortlessly. Researchers at Harvard University studied something called psychological flexibility and found that people who can accept negative emotions without resistance sleep 32% more deeply than those who can't. It's no different from bamboo in the storm. Softness sustains, rigidity breaks. So the next time your mind feels hard, angry, hurt, resisting, pause. Breathe deeply and ask, what am I resisting? Perhaps it's not another person, but a truth that's trying to teach you something. In meditation, softness isn't passivity. It's knowing how to move with life's current without losing your center. That is the strength of compassion, both firm and fluid. Compassion doesn't mean letting others hurt you endlessly. It means understanding why they're hurting, so you don't need revenge. Like the bamboo, it doesn't strike back, nor does it run. It bends until the wind passes. If you can bring that spirit into your daily life, from the way you listen to loved ones, to how you handle pressure at work, to how you face your inner fears, you'll discover the invincible strength of a soft heart. Be like Rin Bo when needed. Bend when the wind blows. And always return to upright when the peace returns. Because bamboo isn't weak, it understands. And those who understand no longer need to prove themselves. In life, there are times when we try to help someone, but end up feeling ashamed that we didn't do it well enough. We cook a clumsy meal and worry they'll criticize it. We offer words of comfort that fall short, and then blame ourselves for possibly making things worse. We want to offer kindness, but our ego sneaks in. Will they think I'm foolish? Was what I did meaningful enough? Many people believe compassion must come wrapped in perfection. But in truth, compassion doesn't need to be beautiful, only sincere. Because what warms another person's heart isn't the form, but the intention behind it. Like in the story of Hanako, a young woman who learned a simple yet profound truth, that compassion is the thread that mends all things, torn, whether a frayed scarf or the human heart. Hanako lived in a small village nestled at the base of a mountain, where winter came early and stayed longer than anywhere else. The wind rolled down from snow-covered peaks, slipping through every crack in the wooden homes, turning the village into a quiet world of gray and damp firewood smoke. Hanako was the daughter of a weaver. Her mother had passed away when she was little, leaving behind a few wooden looms, worn spools of thread, and a home that always smelled faintly of fresh fabric. In that home, Hanako grew up to the rhythm of the loom and faint memories of her mother, a woman who once wove by the window hands, frail but eyes soft, like the silk freshly drawn from its cocoon. On cold days, Hanako would sit by the loom, listening to the wind whistle through the wooden walls as if it were her mother humming. Whenever a thread snapped, she pursed her lips and tied it back together carefully, as if reconnecting a thread of memory. One freezing afternoon, with snow falling gently outside, Hanako looked through the window and saw an old beggar standing shivering at the gate of the temple up on the hill. His coat was in tatters, wind slicing through every tear. His face was hollow hands cupped and trembling in the cold. Without hesitation, Hanako ran into the house. She rummaged through a chest and finally pulled out an old wool scarf. It was the first one her mother had taught her to weave at 12 its edges, frayed threads coming loose, and a small burn mark from a mistake near the fire. She held the scarf, stepped onto the porch, and paused. The fading light of evening revealed every flaw. She frowned. It looked terrible, misshapen, worn, scorched. If I give him this, she thought, will he think I'm insulting him? But then another voice whispered inside her, soft but true. At least he'll be less cold. Hanako sat down on the step and tried to mend the scarf. She sewed one stitch, then another, but the more she tried, the more the thread tangled. It twisted into knots. She tried to undo it, but the thread snapped. Her stitches grew crooked, uneven, just like her tangled thoughts caught between the desire to give and the fear of judgment. Outside, the old man still stood there, shivering, the wind biting through his thin coat. At last, Hanako clutched the scarf and ran to the gate. She handed it to him, bowed her head, and said quietly, voice trembling, I'm sorry. My hands are clumsy. The stitching is poor. The old man took the scarf. His cloudy eyes glimmered for a moment in the evening mist. He smiled, a gentle smile, rare as winter sun. Child, he said, warmth doesn't come from the stitches, it comes from the hands. Hanako froze. The wind still blew, but it was as if a small fire had been lit in her chest. The old man wrapped the scarf around his neck, bowed, and slowly walked toward the temple. Hanako stood there, tears running down her face, though she didn't know if it was from the cold or something deeper. That night, she sat in front of her loom, hands resting on the thread. For the first time, they didn't tremble with fear of making mistakes. She realized that the crooked, awkward stitches on that scarf, though imperfect, were the most sincere thing she had ever made. The next morning, just after the sun crested the mountain, Hanako brought some rice cakes to the temple. In the main hall, she saw something that stopped her heart. Her old scarf had been carefully placed on the altar, just beneath the statue of Kannon, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Morning light streamed through the window, making the worn threads shimmer softly. Next to it was a small note written in faded ink. "One honest stitch is worth more than 1,000 perfect silks." She stood still for a long time. The wind slipped through the temple eaves, carrying the scent of incense. And in that moment, Hanako understood. It wasn't the scarf that had warmed the old man. It was the heart behind it. She bowed her head, gently smiling. For the first time, she felt she had reconnected the final thread from her mother, the thread of compassion. From that day forward, every piece of fabric Hanako wove held a slightly uneven thread, a tiny wrinkle as a quiet reminder that sometimes the most beautiful truths live in what is imperfect. Hanako's story is about the value of imperfect compassion. In Buddhism, compassion isn't about grand gestures or flawless acts. It is the stirring of the heart when it witnesses suffering and the wish to ease it, however small that action may be. We often withhold our kindness thinking, "I'm not good enough, not ready, not capable." But in the truth of Zen compassion asks for no conditions. It doesn't require the perfect words or flawless timing, only presence. The Buddha once said, "A smile with compassion is worth more than 1,000 words without love." When Hanako tried to fix the scarf, she thought she was helping someone, but in truth, she was learning to open her heart. When the threads tangled, she touched a deeper insight. Goodness is not about doing it right, but the state of mind we bring. In modern psychology, scientists call this compassionate presence. They've found that when someone offers sincere care, even without saying a word, the recipient's brain releases oxytocin, the hormone of safety and connection. This means that even if your words or actions aren't perfect, your compassion is still felt. You've probably had sleepless nights replaying something you said wrong, something you think you failed to do. The mind keeps sewing, keeps patching, just like Hanako with the scarf. But the harder we try, the more tangled it gets. If tonight your heart feels tight from old wounds, stop. Inhale deeply. Exhale slowly. Whisper gently to yourself, "I am human too. I have my clumsy stitches." When you accept that, you begin to mend yourself with compassion. Don't try to sew every wound shut. Just hold it with understanding, and it will begin to soften. Like Hanako, you don't need to make a new scarf. The imperfect one was already enough to carry warmth. In sleep, if you let your heart soften this way, each breath becomes a gentle needle, sewing the rifts between body and mind. And when you wake, you'll feel lighter, not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. Hanako's lesson is a quiet reminder to us all. Compassion is the thread that mends every tear. When we act from love, even awkwardly, we carry the power to heal. When we speak from sincerity, even imperfectly, we can warm someone's heart. And when we face ourselves with gentleness, even the broken parts begin to come back together. Compassion is not weakness. It is the strength that melts the ice between us and the world. Because only love can reach the deepest places in us. If someone hurts you, Imagine yourself holding Hanako's needle. Don't use it to stab back. Use it to stitch the torn parts of your own heart. Because only when your heart is whole can the light come through. Have you ever tried so hard to help someone that you forgot they have their own path to walk? You pour your heart into guiding a loved one, a friend or a student, only to feel disappointed when they don't follow your advice. You believe that without your direction, they'll lose their way. Without your control, they'll fall. It's a natural feeling, especially when love and responsibility fill your heart. But sometimes, that love becomes a quiet chain binding rather than freeing. Because when you don't trust someone to take their own steps, you're unconsciously denying the wisdom they already carry. The story of Kazuo the Goosekeeper is a gentle yet profound reminder. True wisdom doesn't emerge when we lead others forward, but when we allow them to fly on their own. Kazuo lived by the river where the sky opened endlessly, and each morning white geese sliced across the sunrise like arrows of wind. His home was a small wooden hut close to the water's edge. At dawn, before the sun could rise, he would open the coop and call the geese with his hoarse, familiar voice. He had raised them since they were tiny, trembling gray chicks in the palm of his hand. One by one, he taught them how to flap their wings, how to swim against the current, how to feel the wind and ride it home. They grew up with his voice, with his footsteps across the dew-soaked fields. Kazuo loved his geese like his own children, but his love carried a quiet fear. He feared they would fly and never return. He feared they'd lose their way in the sky. He feared one might be hurt and he wouldn't be there to save it. Each morning when the geese took flight, Kazuo would shout from the shore, "Fly low. The wind is from the east, don't go too far. Stay in formation, don't scatter." His voice echoed across the fields, bouncing off the river. What began as worry became habit. Instead of soaring high and free, the geese began flying erratically. Some spun in circles, others stayed grounded, too anxious to lift off. And the lower they flew, the louder Kazuo shouted. He believed control meant safety, but instead it caused chaos. Mornings once filled with joy became draining. He watched the geese with growing frustration. "Why won't they listen?" he muttered. "The more I teach, the less they learn." One evening, storm clouds gathered. The golden fields turned steel gray. The sky cracked open with thunder. As wind howled, the geese were already mid-flight across the river. Kazuo panicked, threw on his cloak, and ran to the shore. He shouted names, waved his arms, but the wind devoured every sound. Rain pelted his skin. His voice vanished into the storm. Helpless, Kazuo stood frozen eyes to the sky. Then something unexpected happened. In the chaos, the geese began to turn. They circled inward, regrouped, and formed a V shape. Silently, they cut through the storm, finding each other, aligning and gliding to safety along the bank. They didn't need Kazuo's voice. They only needed space. Kazuo collapsed to the ground, rain mixed with tears. In that moment, he understood. They never needed him to shout. They just needed him to trust. The next morning, the air felt washed clean. Sunlight glistened over the fields. Kazuo opened the coop door and watched in silence. The geese stepped out, flapped their wings, inhaled the cool air, and took flight. He said nothing. For the first time, they flew straight, strong, in perfect harmony. Kazuo brought his hands together, watching until they disappeared into the golden light. That afternoon, as he sat by the river, the head monk from the nearby temple passed by and paused at the sight of Kazuo, quiet and glowing. The monk asked, "Did the geese listen today?" Kazuo smiled gently. "They no longer need to. They know their way now." The monk nodded, eyes resting on the clear sky mirrored in the water. When the guide falls silent, the wind has room to speak. Kazuo bowed. He understood all these years he hadn't been teaching the geese to fly, he had been making them afraid to. And like the geese, life doesn't need to be controlled. It only needs stillness to be heard. As the sun sank behind the reeds, Kazuo remained by the river. The sound of water, the whispering grass, the distant honking of geese, all blended into a gentle song of letting go. He whispered as if to himself, "Perhaps freedom was never something we give. It only appears when we stop holding on." In Buddhism, there is a deep teaching known as non-self and interdependence. It means we cannot walk another's path for them, nor can anyone carry our karma. Kazuo believed love meant guidance, but too much guidance becomes control. The ego disguised as protector still believes only it knows what's best. The Buddha once said, "I am only a guide. No one walks the path for another." Wisdom doesn't come from obedience, but from experience, from falling, rising, and learning through pain. Only when Kazuo stopped shouting could the geese hear the true wind, just as others can only hear their own inner calling when we stop imposing ours. Psychologists call this autonomy support, empowering others by nurturing self-direction. Research shows when people feel trusted, the brain regions tied to creativity and problem-solving light up. But when controlled, they trigger fight-flight or freeze, shutting down natural intelligence. In other words, love is only effective when paired with freedom. Many people can't sleep, not from exhaustion, but because their minds are screaming like Kazuo's voice. They try to control everything: their work, their children, their partners, even their own breath. The more they try, the tighter the mind becomes. The more they chase sleep, the more awake they feel. If tonight you find yourself in that place, try letting go. Let go of needing to sleep, needing to feel calm, needing to fix. Instead, sit quietly and observe your thoughts the way Kazuo watched his geese. Don't change them, just watch. And soon you'll see, like the geese aligning in storm winds, your mind will begin to settle quietly, finding its way back to peace. In meditation, there's a practice called listening meditation. No filtering, no analysis. Just listening to the fan, to the rain, to your heartbeat, to your breath. When you listen deeply, every sound becomes a bell of awakening, and in that moment, you are no longer separate from life. Kazuo learned no one can lead forever. Each person carries their own spiritual map, only they can read it. Love is not holding on. Love is trusting. Not pushing others forward, but walking beside them long enough for them to see their own way. In Buddhism, this is called compassion with wisdom. Compassion without wisdom binds. Wisdom without compassion isolates, but when the two meet, we can love without attachment, teach without force, help without claiming ownership. If you're a parent, a teacher, or simply someone who loves, remember you don't need to fly for them. Just believe they already have wings. That belief alone is the wind that lifts them higher. Have you ever felt cracked? Not in your body, but in your soul. One failure, one wound from the past, one mistake, and suddenly you feel like you're no longer whole. You look in the mirror and see someone different, tired, uncertain, questioning your worth. In life, we're often taught to be perfect, to be strong as steel, to never be wrong. But Zen teaches us the opposite. Cracks don't reduce value, they're where the light enters. This is the story of Isayo, a student in a humble tea house tucked into the forest. A story that shows this truth in the quietest and most profound way. That afternoon inside the straw-roofed tea house perched on a hillside, the scent of wood and tea mingled with thin wisps of steam gentle as the earth's breath. The last light of the day filtered through the paper doors, casting shimmering patterns on the floor. Bamboo rustled outside, a distant stream murmured, and all of it blended into a silence you could only hear if you were fully present. Isayo, a young student, was preparing tea for her teacher. She had studied the tea ceremony for months, every gesture to be slow, soft, and full of presence. But today her heart was racing. Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted the kettle, gripped by a vague fear of making a mistake, of ruining the sacred stillness of this afternoon. Her teacher sat in the corner, still as a moss-covered stone. His eyes were gently closed, face calm, breath slow and steady, like the stream outside. Everything in the room seemed to breathe with him. The clay kettle, the wooden tray, the ancient porcelain cup, even the curling steam. Carefully, Isayo brought the tray over. As she bent to place the cup down, a drop of water spilled from the spout. It landed on the wooden floor with a faint clang, like metal touching metal in the silence. She froze. Looking down, she saw the teacher's favorite teacup cracked with a fine line, silver as a thread. Her face went pale. Her body stiffened. She dropped to her knees, hands trembling, voice caught in her throat. I'm sorry, Master. I didn't mean to." The teacher opened his eyes. His gaze was gentle and deep, like a lake after the rain. He said nothing at first. He simply picked up the cup. The crack ran from the rim to the base, looking as if one more touch would break it. He gazed at it quietly, then slowly poured hot tea into the cup. The warm liquid rose and stopped at the crack. Isayo held her breath, expecting it to leak, but surprisingly, it didn't. The tea stayed inside, gently steaming. The teacher smiled. "You see," he said, "the tea is still held. It hasn't gone anywhere." Isayo looked up, confused. He continued, his voice warm, as if telling an old tale. "The form is cracked, but the essence remains. Just like people, no matter the damage, the heart is still. The heart clear and whole." She bowed her head, silent tears falling to the wooden floor. Something within her melted, as if a frozen part of her heart was pierced by light. For months, she'd feared being wrong, being unworthy of the tea house's calm. Every time her hands shook, she suppressed it. And the more she tried, the more she trembled. Now, with his words about the cup, she saw that the teacher wasn't focused on the flaw. He looked beyond it to something deeper, something unbreakable. The air in the tea house remained the same, the scent of tea, the smell of wood, the soft wind through the curtain. But inside Isayo, everything had shifted. The teacher set the cup down, poured more tea, and said softly, "People think tea ceremony is about perfection, but really, it's about presence. When you're truly present, even a cracked cup still holds tea." Isayo looked up. Her teacher's face was lined with age, but his eyes glowed like lanterns under the eaves. She realized that the most precious thing he'd taught her was not how to pour tea, but how to live each moment without fear. From that day on, Isayo continued preparing tea. Her hands sometimes trembled, but she no longer feared it. She knew that within imperfection lies a deeper stillness. Just like the crack in the old teacup still held warmth, the heart, though once broken, can still hold love. Each afternoon, as sunlight angled through the window, the steam from the tea would rise soft, translucent. And in that mist, she understood awareness does not always come from what is whole, but from the very cracks that let the light through. The cracked teacup is more than an object, it's a metaphor for the human heart. In Buddhist teaching, everything that exists carries the mark of impermanence. No body, no mind, no relationship is forever intact. And because of that impermanence, transformation is possible. Isayo's teacher didn't scold her. He didn't focus on the crack. He saw the tea still inside. Likewise, a practitioner learns not to fixate on what is broken, but to see what remains untouched beneath it. The Buddha taught, "Just as the moon is hidden by clouds, the light of wisdom is never lost, only momentarily veiled." When your heart feels shattered, it's not ruined, it's just that illusion is covering the original light. If we pause and look deeply, we'll discover a wholeness beyond reach, a pure, undisturbed essence. In Zen, this is known as the unshakable awareness amidst change. Even in sadness, anger, or regret, your awareness remains. It watches without breaking. It doesn't crack. It doesn't fade. It's untouched by time. Modern psychology calls this resilience, the ability to heal from within. Harvard research shows that those who accept their flaws and face their wounds report 25% greater happiness than those who chase perfection. True strength doesn't lie in being unbroken. It lies in living peacefully with the cracks. Many people can't rest deeply, not because their bodies aren't tired, but because their hearts don't allow themselves to be cracked. They carry into sleep the voices of self-blame. I failed today. I'm not enough. I ruin everything. If tonight you find yourself caught in such thoughts, remember Isayo's teacup. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and whisper to yourself, "Even with cracks, my heart is whole." With every exhale, imagine your breath moving through the cracks like tea soaking into the earth. Don't hide them. Don't fix them. Just recognize that even your imperfection is teaching you how to love yourself better. In Zen, there is a beautiful idea called the kintsugi of the heart. The Japanese mend broken pottery with gold, making the cracks the most beautiful part. Similarly, every wound inside you, if healed with mindfulness and compassion, becomes a radiant mark on your soul. If tonight you feel broken, don't try to glue yourself back. Just sit quietly, feel your breath. Let your heart soften. You'll begin to see even fragments reflect the moonlight. From Isayo's story, we learn, the form may be cracked, but the essence remains. The body may weaken, memory may fade, trust may wear thin, but deep within is a light that can't be touched. It's where fear, regret, and confusion can't enter. The Buddha called this your Dharma body, your original face, the one you had before you were born. It is never damaged, never improved, never defined by success or failure. When you learn to see yourself from that place, all the things that once caused suffering become temporary cracks on the surface. And through those cracks, light begins to shine. Scientifically, sleep experts have found that self-acceptance lowers activity in the brain's amygdala, the area tied to fear and stress, allowing the body to produce natural melatonin, the hormone of peace and deep rest. So, accepting your cracks isn't just spiritual, it's healing for your biology too. When the teacher poured more tea into the cracked cup, Isayo looked at the still water and felt tears. She understood wholeness isn't about appearance, it's about the ability to hold. Outside, the stream still flowed, water striking stone like the heartbeat of the earth. The teacher said gently, "You see, even cracked the cup still holds tea. Just like people, when the heart stays open, love can still flow." And naturally, the next story brings us to Yori the water carrier. Another story where water appears again, no longer resting in a cup, but carried across shoulders. There we'll see mindfulness isn't in keeping the water from spilling, but in every step taken with it. Morning on the mountain often began with the echo of the temple bell ringing through the mist, followed by the familiar rhythm of shoulders bearing water. Among those figures was Yori. He was the one who carried water for the small temple at the foot of the hill, a task he had done every day for 10 years. Each morning before the sun rose, Yori walked to the stream, filled the wooden buckets, climbed the slope, poured the water into the large jars, and returned again. Hundreds of trips like this, day after day, without change. And something began to grow in his heart, fatigue and frustration. He started to ask himself, why do I keep repeating this endless task? Was I born just to carry water? That question might seem small, but it is one many people quietly ask themselves in modern life. We work, strive, and take care of responsibilities each day, yet somehow lose our sense of meaning. We move like machines, act out of habit, and can no longer find where our heart has gone. So it was for Yori. Until one day, between the stream and the sound of water pouring, he heard something completely different. That morning, the sky had just cleared after a night of rain. The air was so fresh, you could smell wet earth, young leaves, and a faint trace of cooking smoke drifting through the morning mist. The dirt path leading up to the temple was slippery and steep, as if testing every step. Yori, still a young novice, carried the bamboo buckets full of water from the stream. With each step, his shoulders strained and his feet pressed deep into the mud. The water swayed gently, reflecting the pale light of dawn. The early wind whispered through the bamboo forest, a crow called from afar, and Yori's footsteps fell into the slow rhythm of a quiet morning. But inside, Yori was not quiet. He sighed, wiped the sweat that had mixed with mist, and muttered, "Every day is the same. I carry water, pour it, and tomorrow I'll do it again." On and on. My life is no different from that stream. It just flows endlessly without reaching anywhere. He set the buckets down by a large rock beside the path. One of the bamboo buckets tilted slightly, and a few drops of water fell to the ground. Plop, plop, plop. At first, the sound irritated Yori even more. Each drop felt like a reminder of the endless repetition of a task that had lost all meaning. But as he sat longer, his breath began to slow. The sound of last night's rain still lingered in the leaves, and within that faint stillness, he began to truly listen. Strangely, the sound of water no longer felt the same. It wasn't a scattered dripping anymore. It was flowing, a rhythmic stream, as if the earth itself were breathing. Each drop merged into the soil, forming a soft, soothing tone. It wasn't monotonous. It had rhythm pauses and gentle echoes. Yori closed his eyes. In that moment, His breath aligned with the sound as if he too was flowing with the water. A light breeze passed by, swaying his hair, dampened by mist. And in that instant, he realized something he had never seen before. Stillness does not come from resting, it comes from pausing to listen. He opened his eyes and looked at the bamboo buckets. Water was still dripping, but now instead of seeing it as waste, he saw it as return. Each drop was teaching him the lesson his teacher once told him. If your mind is restless, even the simplest task becomes a burden. If your mind is still, every drop of water is the Dharma. A thought lit up in Yori's mind. He understood this water was the sutra he recited each morning. The everyday sounds he once ignored were actually the rhythm of life itself, a gentle reminder from the present moment that even the smallest actions hold sacredness when we are truly present. He stood up and lifted the buckets back onto his shoulders. His shoulders still ached, his steps were still heavy, but his heart was different. The sloshing water no longer annoyed him. It became a companion, a gentle guide back to his breath. Each ripple reminded him to inhale deeply and exhale slowly. From that day on, Yori stopped counting his trips. He simply walked step by step, breath by breath. The sound of water swinging on his shoulders was no longer the sound of strain. It became the voice of mindfulness. With every step on that muddy path, he heard the stream, the leaves, and his own mind quiet, clear, free of complaint. People at the temple said that Yori had become better at carrying water, but only he knew the real change wasn't in his shoulders. It was deeper. He no longer needed to arrive somewhere because he was fully present in each drop that fell. Yori's story teaches us something profound. A simple task becomes sacred when we are fully present. Meditation doesn't only exist in cross-legged postures or the sound of temple bells. Meditation lives in how we bring our whole presence into the smallest things, washing dishes, sweeping leaves, cooking rice, or carrying water. This is mindfulness in motion. When our mind is absent, even the most meaningful task feels heavy. But when our mind is present, even the simplest act can become meditation. The Buddha once taught, "When walking, know you are walking. When standing, know you are standing. When doing, know you are doing." It sounds simple, but it is a powerful transformation. Because in most of life, we are not present. While carrying water, we think about yesterday. While eating, we worry about tomorrow. While sitting, we dream about what hasn't happened. This absence from the now makes life feel empty. Not because we lack things to do, but because we lack our presence while doing them. In modern psychology, this is called mind wandering. A Harvard study found that humans spend nearly 47% of their day thinking about something other than what they're doing, and that mind wandering is the leading cause of unhappiness. When we are not here, we disconnect from life. But when we return, every action becomes meditation, even carrying water or listening to rain. Perhaps in your life, no one asks you to carry buckets each morning, but you carry hundreds of invisible ones. Work responsibility, expectations, worries, fears. You carry them from morning to night, rarely pausing to ask, "Am I truly living or just carrying?" Try what Yori did. Stop in the middle of the path, not to give up, but to listen. When you pause, you can hear your own water, your breath, your heartbeat. The silence between two thoughts. This is the Sutra of Life. If you are hearing these words before sleep, soften your shoulders, relax your face, and let your breath flow naturally. You don't need to force away the fatigue, just be present with it. As your breath flows, imagine you are carrying 2 buckets in your heart, but they're not heavy. With each step, the water inside reflects the moonlight, silent and shimmering. Deep sleep doesn't come from emptying your mind, but from accepting the moment just as it is. If you can carry each breath with peace, you are already meditating, even lying down. From Yori's story, we learn this. No task is beneath you. Only the unconscious mind fails to see its sacredness. In Buddhism, every action is an opportunity to meditate. Washing dishes is meditation. Carrying water is meditation. Even office work is meditation, if we bring full awareness. Because awakening doesn't come from what we do, but how we do it. The Buddha said, "A person who sweeps the temple in mindfulness is closer to the path than one who chants mindlessly." So if your life feels dull, repetitive, or meaningless, don't try to change the outside world first. Change how you see. Bring the light of attention to your task, and the task will glow. Scientifically, neuroscience studies show that when people practice mindfulness in simple tasks like washing dishes or slow walking, activity in the prefrontal cortex linked to anxiety decreases while areas associated with positive emotion become more active. The mind stabilizes, breath deepens, heart rate harmonizes. This is meditation in daily life. When we are truly present, even the sound of pouring water becomes the sound of peace. There is no separation between task and meditation. Every moment is Dharma revealing itself. One evening after finishing his final trip, Yori sat beside the stream watching the sunlight dance on the surface of the water. He no longer heard the sound of water as labor, but as the sound of consciousness touching the present. The teacher walked by and gently asked, "How many buckets did you carry today, Yori?" Yori smiled. "I stopped counting, Master. I just listened to the water and felt full." The teacher nodded. "Good. When you stop counting, you begin to live." And just like that flowing stream, the next story carries us to Akio, the keeper of the flame. If Yori taught us meditation in movement, Akio will show us the stillness of meditation, where even a small flame can illuminate the long night of the mind. Let's continue and discover what that means. That evening, the temple, nestled deep in the forest, was veiled in a thick mist. The soft murmur of the stream mingled with the chirping of insects, and the flickering candlelight in the Buddha hall was the only source of illumination. That light, though delicate, offered a sense of safety, like a warm breath in the darkness. Akio, the one in charge of lighting the candles in the temple, had devoted himself to the task for many years. It was his quiet form of practice. Each afternoon, he lit every flame, watched the wind, and kept them burning late into the night. But that night, an unexpected gust of wind slipped through the door crack. The central candle, the one placed before the Buddha statue, flickered out. The entire hall was plunged into darkness. Akio panicked, then grew angry. He struck a match, trying to relight it, but the candle wouldn't burn. He tried again, a third time. Each time the flame vanished as if mocking him. Inside Akio, a troubled thought rose. "I've done this for years. Why can't I even keep one flame alive? Am I failing? Or is the Buddha testing me?" we are often the same. In life, when our own candle goes out, our faith, our love, our inner strength, we tend to grow angry or blame ourselves. But perhaps it is the darkness itself that helps us truly see the value of light. Akio sat alone in the hall. Moonlight streamed in through the window, casting faint, silvery lines across the old wooden floor. The room was so silent, he could hear the wind threading through the shutters and his own heartbeat. Before him, the candle he'd just carefully lit sputtered and went out again. A thin wisp of smoke curled into the air and disappeared. Akio gripped the candle tightly, sweat forming on his brow. A wave of anger flared inside him, hot and sharp. He clenched the wax until it snapped in half. His voice trembled in frustration. I've spent my life protecting light, and still the wind snuffs it out. As if in response, the breeze stirred again, teasing strands of hair across his forehead. At that moment, the back door slid open. The Zen master stepped in. His movement was so gentle the wooden floor made no sound. He glanced at the broken candle on the floor. No scolding, no sigh. He simply asked, "Why are you angry?" Akio still bowed, replied with a trembling voice, "Because I tried so hard and still I failed. I just wanted to keep the light burning for the Buddha, and yet..." The master said nothing. He sat beside Akio, picked up one half of the candle and placed it gently back into the old brass holder. Then, striking a match, he relit it. The flame glowed, reflecting across his calm, warm face. As the candle reignited, he poured tea into a small cup and said in a deep voice, "Can you truly know how to light a candle without having ever seen it go out?" The room seemed to pause. Only the soft crackle of the flame remained. Akio bowed his head, feeling something melt inside light and sharp. The master looked at the flickering candle and continued, "You only understand light fully after you've been through darkness, just as compassion deepens when you've known pain. Without loss, you can't appreciate what remains. Without something going out, you don't know what it means to truly shine." Outside, the wind blew again. The flame swayed, leaning as though it might extinguish once more. Akio instinctively cupped his hands around it. But this time, he wasn't frantic. He wasn't afraid. He simply watched, letting the warmth slowly spread to his fingertips. The flame quivered, but did not die. After some time, the master stood and left with a voice as soft as breath. Keeping the light alive isn't about blocking the wind. It's about not letting your mind sway with it. That night, Akio remained in the Buddha hall for a long time. The small candle continued to burn, not because he protected it, but because it simply did. He no longer thought about guarding it. He only felt the peace spreading through his palms, an inner warmth, not born of flame, but of stillness. In that moment, he understood what mattered wasn't keeping the flame from going out, but keeping his own heart bright, even when the wind continued to blow. The candle in this story is a symbol of mindfulness and wisdom. When we practice, we want our mind to be clear, calm. But life brings many gusts of wind, disappointments, grief, anger, loneliness that make our flame flicker or vanish. Like Akio, most of us react with frustration, thinking the loss of light means failure. But in the Dharma, darkness is not the enemy. It is part of the path to awakening. The Buddha himself sat through the darkest night beneath the Bodhi tree before enlightenment. Without that night, without wind, temptation, and fear, there would be no sunrise of wisdom. Light and dark are not opposites, but companions. Even within us, ignorance is what leads us to wisdom if we can face it and transform it. Modern psychology agrees. People often awaken only after profound psychological rupture, loss, heartbreak, or illness. In those moments, the brain activates a mechanism called meaning reconstruction. We begin to ask what happiness really is, what it means to exist, who we truly are. In other words, darkness opens the door to deeper insight. Think about your own life. When everything is going well, do you pause to feel grateful? Or only when something is lost, do you realize how precious it was? Like Akio, whenever your inner candle goes out, when trust is broken, when you're wounded by someone you love, when your dreams collapse, don't blame yourself too quickly. Let it be a moment to see the light more clearly. Peace doesn't mean you were never unsettled. Stillness doesn't mean there was never a storm. It means you learned how to witness it without being carried away. If you're listening to this story at night, let the light in your room soften. Imagine a single candle glowing gently in front of you. Each breath you take is a breeze, sometimes steady, sometimes shaky. But let the candle find its rhythm. Don't blow it. Don't shield it. Let it dance, tremble, and survive. Because life is the same, it doesn't have to be perfect, only continuous. Relax your shoulders. Soften your arms. Feel your breath moving in and out like warm light flowing through your body. Sleep will come not when you silence your thoughts, but when you stop fearing your inner shadows. The lesson behind Akio's story is impermanence and non-self. No flame burns forever. No joy remains unchanged. But in realizing this, we stop clinging, stop fearing, and find peace in the unfolding. In Zen, there's an old saying, when the mind is bright, darkness disappears. But when the mind clings to brightness, darkness returns. In other words, if we only want the light and reject the dark, we still don't understand. True practitioners accept both as two sides of the same hand. Neuroscience shows that when people learn to accept discomfort instead of resisting it, activity in the amygdala, the fear center, decreases. The brain releases serotonin, calming the emotions, improving sleep, and sharpening focus. In other words, when we stop fighting the darkness, the light returns naturally. After that night, Akio no longer got angry when the flame went out. Each time he lit a candle, he smiled, knowing that the flame may die, but the inner light never does. The candle became his silent teacher, reminding him that all we need to illuminate is already within. When morning came, sunlight spilled through the window. Akio gently extinguished the flame. For the first time in his life, he felt joy doing it, because he understood it wasn't the candle going out. The light had simply changed form. And so, it is for us. Every hardship, every heartbreak, every deep night's sleep after a dark day, all of it is life relighting us from within. Once you've passed through enough darkness, you're no longer afraid. Because you know the light doesn't need your protection. It was never gone. And just like that, the journey of the candle ends in stillness. The Zen stories you've listened to tonight are not just ancient teachings, they are mirrors for your own inner path. From Ren, the chef who found joy in each movement, Haru, who learned to let go of the last leaf, Taro, who realized the value of breath after the storm, to Akio, who discovered that light can't be preserved without first letting it go. They all point to the same place, your own silent presence. Peace doesn't come from striving. It comes when you stop and allow everything to be exactly as it is. When you stop trying to hold the light, the darkness becomes your friend. When you stop trying to understand, wisdom begins to bloom. When you stop chasing peace, it finds you because it's always been here. You don't need to do anything more to deserve rest. You don't need to be flawless to be loved. You don't need to grasp every Zen teaching to awaken. You only need to be here in this moment. You only need to let go of what you've been holding. You only need to trust in life's natural wisdom. Sleep-like awakening doesn't come from effort. It comes when you stop trying to control it. When your mind stops wandering, your body knows how to return to rest. When you stop forcing peace, the breath becomes gentle again. When you stop seeking calm, calm recognizes you. Now let your body do what it always knows how to do. No need to adjust your breath, it's breathing itself. No need to force your mind to be still, it will settle when you stop making it. No need to try to sleep. Sleep will arrive when you stop waiting. You've listened, you've let go, and you've been fully present in each story, each breath, each pause between the words. Now let your eyes close. Feel your breath becoming lighter. Feel your skin, your warmth, your weight melting into the ground beneath you. No need to try to relax, just allow it. No need to strive for peace, just be here. Everything else will take care of itself, like water returning to the sea, like leaves falling when their season comes, like moonlight shining without anyone to light it. Sleep will come not because you chased it, but because you stopped. And when you wake, you'll carry a new stillness not taught, but born of deep trust in life itself. Because true peace is not something you must reach. It's something you remember when you stop running. Thank you for being here with Buddhism Seeds. If these stories touched you, leave a small sign, a subscription, a share, a comment, so we can spread this stillness to more hearts. May you rest deeply tonight. May your breath be light as the wind. May your heart settle like an autumn lake. And may the light within you still be there when you wake, gentle, steady, and full of peace. Sleep well now.